Chapter 626, Hiding in the Dark. Sonny remained motionless for a while, then shifted his gaze, moving it to the very end of the field of shimmering runes. Soon, Nef's description appeared before him. He lingered for a few moments, and then read, Soul Fragments, 2478-4000. The corner of his mouth twitched. Of course. She is in a hell of her own, after all. The gap between them had diminished, but barely. He was still behind, still lacking. But she was alive, at least, and fighting with all her strength to return. If Nef refused to give up, then he would have to persevere too. With a sigh, Sonny turned away and looked back to his runes, finding the list of his memories and echoes. His eyes suddenly gleamed, but then grew dark and slightly despondent. What the hell? How is this even possible? Among the names of his memories, dozens of new ones shimmered in the darkness. It seemed that the spell continued to reward him, even while their connection was obstructed by the sorceries of hope. It sort of made sense. The fact that Sonny had not been able to communicate with the spell did not mean that it had not continued to watch his every step. He was inside one of its nightmares, after all, which created a swarm of questions on its own. Not caring to consider them, Sonny silently counted the new memories. 39, there were 39 of them. And yet, there was not a single echo he had received after slaughtering nearly 1,000 nightmare creatures. Not even a hint of one. Doesn't make any sense. None at all. What is this, a joke? It seemed that his luck when it came to memories had been incredible, while his luck when it came to echoes had been beyond terrible. He should have received 4 or 5 at least, but he had not. Sonny stared into the darkness for a while, his expression glum. Then he sighed. Well, doesn't matter. It's a pity that I did not receive an echo of the Red Priest, though. I would have made him into a shadow, just to get a chance to kill that bastard again. He studied his new memories, slowly reading their names and descriptions. A few were good, and a couple were splendid. The rest, however, were worse than what he already had in his arsenal. Their only use was to feed Saint. This time, however, he did not hurry to give them away as sustenance for the taciturn demon. Instead, Sonny hesitated for a long time, and then dismissed the runes. He had other plans for these memories. Each of them possessed a unique weave, one that he would be able to study and experiment with, while not fearing to damage or destroy an actually valuable instrument. He would be able to use Weaver's needle now, too, instead of cutting his fingers on the ethereal, but perfectly sharp strings. Satisfied with that decision, Sonny finished the last of synth paste tubes he had taken out of the covetous coffer, indifferently dropped them into the dark abyss of the sky below, and sent one of his shadows to scout out the situation above. The sun was rolling toward the horizon, and the night was swiftly approaching. That meant that he would have to move soon. Over the next few days, Sonny traveled southeast, staying in the darkness of the sky below during the night, and finding shelter on the undersides of the floating island during the day. He was still weak because of his injuries and had to make frequent stops to rest and sleep, which slowed him down considerably. In the course of these days, Sonny made several stunning discoveries. The first one was rather pleasant and beneficial to him. As it turned out, there were far fewer nightmare creatures populating the Kingdom of Hope in this era than there were in the future. That included the harrowing abominations that dwelled on the dark side of the islands. Their absence made the task of remaining below the isles far easier for him. Of course, there were still some monstrosities hiding in the darkness, but not nearly enough to make it too hard to avoid them. In retrospect, that made sense. These lands were not completely devastated yet, and there were plenty of humans living on the levitating islands. It was because of them and their efforts that the population of nightmare creatures was so low. It was also the reason why it took Solvain and her zealots a full decade or more to gather enough abominations to hold the accursed trials. The second discovery he made was far less fortuitous, and also had to do with the human inhabitants of the Kingdom of Hope. He was still in the territory of the worshippers of war, which made it all but impossible to appear on the surface of the islands during the day, unnoticed. But the dark side wasn't completely safe either. Not once and not twice, he saw humans traveling either across the heavenly chains or through the sky below. Hidden in the shadows, he observed several flying ships sail through the boundless darkness, some adorned with sails of pristine white, some of vivid red. He even witnessed two vessels locked in furious battle, arrows and pieces of burning wood falling into the abyss like rain. In the end, the ship with white sails rammed into the red one, splitting the vessel in half and sending the captain and the crew to their deaths in the sky below. These ships looked simultaneously similar and different to the one the firekeepers had repaired and guided to the Ebony Tower. They were much smaller and slower, and didn't have a magnificent tree growing around their masts. The vessels Sonny had spent several weeks on looked much more ancient in comparison. Like the original in front of lesser copies. The third discovery Sonny made was, perhaps, the most shocking. The crushing did not exist in this era. The islands rose and fell as usual, but no matter how high they climbed, no deadly force assaulted them, threatening to destroy anything too weak or too slow to run away. Many of the nightmare creatures Sonny had studied before hunting them down, in the future, were somewhat different here from what he knew. He had understood that fact in the arena, and confirmed it while observing the islands through the eyes of his shadows after escaping it. Now he learned why. The crushing did not yet exist, and for that reason, the nightmare creatures had not gone through thousands of years of adaptation to learn how to survive its burden. Neither their bodies nor their behavior changed to accommodate the deadly force that would terrorize the entire region in the future yet, and that was why he had found them to be both familiar and strange. Armed with that knowledge, Sonny slowly made his way south, leaving the Red Colosseum and St. Solvain further and further behind. His wounds slowly healed, and soon he felt that he would not be entirely useless in the fight anymore. That was just in time, because his days of peace were about to come to an end. Chapter 627, Needlework. It took Sonny almost 2 weeks to approach the southern boundary of the Chained Isles. The further from the Red Colosseum he went, the less presence the warmongers had there. With Solvain's militant order occupying the western reaches of the Kingdom of Hope and the followers of Sun God in control of its center, engaged in a centuries-old conflict with each other, the south remained desolate and neglected. That made Sonny's life a bit easier, but also caused him to lower his guard a little. He still had to remain vigilant, though, because there were more and more unsightly horrors hiding in the deep shadows of the dark side as he traveled away from human settlements. On one of these days, Sonny found himself clinging to the underside of a small floating island as he waited for the arrival of night. He had already rested and dined on several tubes of synth paste, so for now, there was nothing much for him to do. As had been his habit for the past week or so, he summoned one of the memories from the Colosseum and studied its weave, trying to peer into the secrets of the complicated pattern of ethereal strings. Armed with his innate intuition and the ability to compare different memories to each other, he was making tortuously slow progress in his understanding of sorcery, or at least of this type of it. Weaver's sorcery seemed elegant, strange, and marvelous, but also inhumanly complex and elaborate. Sonny doubted that he would be able to comprehend its foundational principles any time soon. And even if he did, his human mind was simply unable to encompass the whole of the infinitely convoluted patterns, let alone create one from scratch. Maybe if he had a powerful supercomputer instead of a brain in any case, he was not going to be creating his own memories just yet. Or maybe ever. That didn't mean that he couldn't do anything, though. Sonny might not have had the capacity to create new weaves, but he had already proven his ability to copy those that already existed. He had reproduced the simplest and most common of them, the pattern responsible for storing memories in his soul and then summoning them back through essence in the dungeon of the Red Colosseum. With enough time and preparation, he would be able to copy other enchantments of the familiar weaves, too. Creating anything meaningful was going to take a while, though, but that was not what Sonny was currently trying to achieve. Instead, he wanted to expand his sorceress repertoire from 1 trick to no less than 2 tricks. He was experimenting with his memories in hopes of learning how to modify and change an existing enchantment. Right now, Sonny was holding a slim dagger in one hand and a small silver bell in the other. The silver bell was the first memory he had ever received, and also the simplest, while the slim dagger was one of the weapons he had won in the arena. Its enchantment was rather straightforward. It made the weapon utterly noiseless. It didn't ring when struck against armor or another blade, and didn't even rustle as it entered the enemy's flesh. Sunny had chosen these two memories for the experiment because, at the core, their enchantments were very similar. One was that of sound amplification, while the other was that of sound nullification. He wanted to change the latter into the former. In other words, he wanted to turn the silent dagger into a very noisy dagger, not because that would be very useful, but to prove that he was capable of modifying enchantments. After studying the spell weave of the silver bell for many days, Sunny was close to memorizing the staggering complexity of the pattern of strings entirely. Since the bell had only one enchantment, it was easy to isolate it from the parts of the pattern that were common to all memories. So in theory, he knew what shape to create. The dagger, on the other hand, was a bit different. It also only had a single enchantment and a single ember anchoring the pattern, but that ember was brighter, and the pattern itself was much larger and more intricate. However, there were certain similarities with the one in the bell, so Sunny could imagine turning one into another. He hesitated for a while, then sighed, and raised Weaver's needle, just like on the day he had found it. The long and narrow needle was enveloped in a faint, weak golden shine that only he could see thousands of years ago, or maybe sometime in the future it had absorbed some of Weaver's deific blood, along with tiny traces of divinity. Sunny suspected that the needle had not been a magical tool, and neither had it actually belonged to Weaver. Rather, it had been just a random needle that the demon of fate found in the ebony tower and made use of to sew a new arm to their body, and its magical properties came from being washed in the daemon's blood. However, now, the needle did possess magical properties. Just like Sunny's fingers, it was capable of interacting with the ephemeral strings that constituted spellweaves. Sunny threaded a shadow string through the needle and carefully thrust it into the sorcerous pattern that created the enchantment of the silent dagger. He was hoping to replace some of the existing strings with his own, shift others around, and remove some completely. At first, everything went well. Sunny was on the verge of getting excited. But then, the same thing that happened with all his previous experiments repeated itself. At some point, the strings trembled, and then the whole pattern tore and collapsed, turning into a chaotic mess of ripped and fluttering threads. Sunny hurriedly retracted his hand, afraid to lose it, and watched as the slim dagger shimmered and disintegrated into a rain of dim sparks. A few moments later, the spell spoke solemnly. "Your memory has been destroyed." Sunny grimaced and closed his eyes. Damnation, another one. Then, however, he suddenly shifted and turned his head up, staring at the stone surface above him as if trying to pierce its solid mass with his gaze. Up above, on the surface of the small island, one of his shadows had noticed movement. Chapter 628, From the Dark Side. The grass covering the surface of the island moved, and strange shapes appeared from beneath it. Some were similar to each other, while some were not, but all shared the same deep emerald color. The shapes levitated upward, slowly coalescing together. The creepy shadow observed the eerie event from the shade of a large boulder, darkly excited. Sunny only understood what it was so excited about when the boulder suddenly split open and fell apart, making way for another of the shapes, this one easily recognizable. It was a massive emerald jawbone, similar to a human one in all aspects, except for size. The creepy guy had always been strangely fascinated by dead things. No wonder he got fixated on a bunch of flying bones. As Sunny watched, the emerald bones assembled into a towering human skeleton, very similar to the powerful abomination of the same kind Sunny had fought and destroyed in the Red Colosseum, but much larger and way more frightening. The emerald skeleton stared north for a while, and then slowly headed toward the edge of the island, each of its steps making the ground shake. At the same time, a loud rattle of the heavenly chain rolled through the two skies. Sunny was so used to hearing them that he didn't pay it any attention at first, but then a deep frown appeared on his face. Something wasn't right. The rattling of the chain sounded different somehow. He lingered for a few moments, then silently dove into the shadows and glided to the northern slope of the flying isle. As soon as Sunny saw the heavenly chain stretching far into the distance, his heart grew cold. A terrifying abomination with a body that resembled a dirty mass of pitch-black tar was crawling underneath it, its back facing the sky below. Each second, a dozen tendrils of liquid darkness shot forward from the mass, sticking to the links of the giant chain and pulling the creature forward. The monstrosity was at least 20 meters long and so heavy that the iron of the heavenly tether groaned under its weight. What hellish nightmare is this? Sonny peered beneath the surface of the black tar creature and shuddered once he saw the taint of corruption that hid within its soul. The two hideous nodes of swirling darkness that spread cancerous veins through the body of the abomination were especially ripe and horrid, revealing its rank. Corrupted, a corrupted monster. Earlier, when he had been passing the islands north of his current shelter, he had felt the shadow of a powerful fiend hiding beneath one of them. Who knew that the horror nesting on the dark side of the flying island would turn out to be equal to the harrowing wormvine, and then decide to follow Sonny south on top of that? As Sonny froze for a moment, a large boulder suddenly flew from the island and hit the massive body of the black tar fiend, sending ripples across its liquid flesh. The force of the impact was so great that a destructive shockwave spread in all directions, causing the heavenly chain to rattle even louder. On the surface of the island, the towering emerald skeleton lowered its arms and stared at the invading horror, dark lights igniting in the pits of its empty eye sockets. The boulder it had just thrown disappeared within the body of the corrupted abomination, seemingly dealing it no damage. The creature simply continued crawling, its massive body surging forward like a black tide. I probably need to run, but before he could do anything, the advancing monster suddenly convulsed, and in the next second, dozens of sharp stone shards shot out of its flesh, each covered by fetid black liquid. Some rained on the emerald skeleton, and some hit the slopes of the island, causing large chunks of weathered stone to be turned into dust. Sonny barely managed to dodge one of them, and stared with resentment at the small crater that appeared in place of his hiding place. Sure, he was an incorporeal shadow right now, but he would not make the mistake of assuming that a corrupted abomination had no way of wounding him. Who knew what this horror was capable of? And just as this thought entered his mind, he noticed that there was a thin layer of black tar spread around the point of impact, and dozens of similar ones nearby. As he watched, the foul liquid started to move, coalescing into small dark blobs. Some of them began crawling up toward the emerald skeleton, but some froze for a moment and then flowed toward him, as though sensing his location. Scrap! Sonny hurriedly summoned back the creepy shadow and lunged away, gliding through the shadows as fast as he could. By the time he reached the bottom of the island, the black tar monster was already upon the skeleton. Numerous tendrils of darkness shot forward, enveloping the towering abomination. Despite all its might, the emerald skeleton was instantly trapped and pulled inside the mass of liquid darkness. It struggled desperately, but to no avail. Seconds later, its massive figure disappeared within the body of the dark-side fiend without a trace. Now just forget about me, Hellspawn. I'm too small and inconsequential anyway. Sonny was already on the southern slope of the island, rushing toward the other heavenly chain that led away from this damned place. Somewhere above him, the giant mass of liquid darkness rippled, perhaps grinding the ancient emerald bones into dust. And then the corrupted fiend suddenly surged forward with incredible speed, heading for the very same chain, or rather, for the swift shadow that hoped to use the chain to escape. Luckily, Sonny reached it first. He burst from the shadows, flying across the span of empty air, and landed on the surface of the heavenly tether in a roll. Without wasting a single moment, Sonny pushed himself off of the cold iron surface, with all four arms wrapped the shadows around his body, and ran. As dull pain spread through his chest, the mantle of the underworld turned as light as a feather. Just a few seconds later, the chain swayed wildly beneath his feet, announcing that the black tar monster had reached it too. Curses. There were a few hundred meters of giant sunlit links in front of him, and only past that was the heavenly tether submerged into the darkness of the sky below and shrouded in shadows. I'll make it, surely I will. Sonny growled, bared his fangs and ran. Chapter 629. Pursuit. Sonny's upper arms were much longer than that of a human. Bending down, he fell on all fours and broke into a bestial gallop, flying forward with incredible speed. With each jump, the saving darkness grew closer and closer. The links of the heavenly chain rattled and swayed wildly beneath him as the black tar fiend pursued. Sunny could have tried to find safety in the depth of the sky below, but his speed and maneuverability in the air would have been severely diminished. If the abomination decided to expel another rain of tar-covered projectiles, he would be shredded, torn to pieces, and consumed. Besides, there was no telling if the harrowing creature could follow him into the abyss. His best chance was to reach the segment of the chain submerged in darkness, glide across it as a swift shadow, and escape to the next island. Behind him, the mass of liquid darkness rolled forward with staggering speed, hundreds of black tendrils shooting out of it every moment to form a ceaseless tide. The distance between them grew smaller and smaller still. Oh gods! Just a split second before the tendrils of darkness descended upon him, Sunny finally reached a sufficiently low altitude and dove into the shadows, turning into one of them and rushing forward across the giant chain. The space where he stood just a moment ago was instantly enveloped by the foul flesh of the tar monstrosity, which then lunged after him, somehow starting to move even faster. A strange, deafening sound that resembled a gurgling wail escaped from the depths of the mass of liquid darkness, causing Sunny's whole being to writhe in pain. It washed over the world like a wave, penetrating deep into the darkness of the sky below and the radiance of the sky above, and making both shudder. Sunny fled across the border between two skies, and the harrowing creature from the dark side followed. Soon, the length of the heavenly chain that was shrouded in shadows came to the end, and he escaped them at a terrible speed, sliding across the metal of the links and barely keeping himself from plummeting down. A tide of black, shifting tendrils fell at him almost instantly, but hit only ancient iron. Sunny had stepped through shadows, appearing a couple of dozen meters away, and then once again, teleporting to the surface of the island that loomed above him now. That last jump ate a lot of his essence, but he had no other choice than to make it. Falling to the ground, Sunny grabbed at his chest, which was pulsating with dull, crippling pain, and groaned. Then he threw himself up and continued running. Behind him, the tendrils of black tar were already above the edge of the island. Sunny found himself among remnants of an ancient battlefield. Carcasses of broken ships lay forlornly on the barren earth, their blackened hulls covered with scorch marks and gaping with empty darkness. Here and there, pieces of rusty weapons and armor protruded from the ground, covered with ash. The ground itself was shattered and uneven, littered with pockmarks of deep craters. Knowing that he would never escape the giant fiend on foot, Sunny alternated between galloping and jumping through shadows for short distances, sometimes chaining several jumps in a row. By exerting every fiber of his demonic body to its limit, he managed to stay ahead of the pursuing abomination for now, even if it was just barely. Behind him, the monstrous creature barreled through wreckages of the fallen ships, breaking them apart with a thunderous cacophony of crashes. Its tendrils ripped the wooden hulls apart like paper, sending clouds of ash and debris flying through the air. On the opposite side of the island, Sunny saw the remnants of a colossal pyre, thousands upon thousands of charred human bones arranged into a solemn pyramid to form it. These were, perhaps, the remains of the warriors that had fought in this battle and once crewed the broken ships. What had brought them to this island, and what had they fought for? Who had won the terrible battle, and at what cost? Had this pyre been meant to honor fallen heroes or dispose of dead enemies, or even prisoners, perhaps? Without sparing a single thought to these questions, he dove down from the edge and fell through the air, reaching another chain and escaping further south. A few moments later, the corrupted fiend flowed over the edge as well, landing at the heavenly tether with a deafening thud. Sunny was still ahead. The fiend failed to outrun him, for now. The problem was that Sunny was growing tired and slowly running out of shadow essence, while the black tar monster was not. South, 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 pursued by the fiend from the dark side, Sunny fled south, crossing one island after another. But no matter how fast he ran, the damned monstrosity was faster. Many of the islands he traversed were populated by nightmare creatures of all kinds. But unlike the towering emerald skeleton, these ones did not even try to fight the corrupted abomination. Instead, they fled too, scattering to the neighboring islands in something that resembled panic, or being consumed if they were not swift enough. At some point, Sonny found himself running side by side with all kinds of nightmare creatures that would have usually not hesitated to attack him. They were like forest animals escaping from a raging fire. When a forest fire spread like an insatiable monster, devouring all in its way, predators and prey were made equal before its terrifying strength. Besides, with his monstrous body and his mind still clouded by the countless times he had shadowed the abominations of all kinds in the Red Colosseum, Sonny was less unlike the nightmare creatures than he had used to be. The black tar monster, however, was making a clear distinction between him and all the other creatures. It only paid attention to those abominations that were directly in its way, while its only goal, for some damned reason, was singular: to catch and consume Sonny. Curse it all, what's so special about me? Was it the fact that he followed the path of ascension instead of corruption? Was it his nature as a shadow, or maybe was it the flame of divinity that burned in his soul and flowed through his veins? Was that flame an irresistible lure for a creature like that? There was no answer. All Sonny could do was run, 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 as his chest became consumed with pain and his soul became empty and barren, devoid of any essence at all. Sometime later he escaped from the shadows one last time and fell on the emerald grass of a new island, almost completely spent of essence and sapped of all stamina. He was done for. His single heart was beating wildly in his aching chest, drowning as it tried to do the work meant for two. His 4 lungs were on fire. This was it. This was as far as he could go. Sonny drew in a hoarse breath and then slowly rose to his feet. His eyes shone with grim darkness. So be it, good. Come and get me, beast. Let us see which one of us is stronger. I have killed creatures mightier than you before. Granted, during the battle with Wormvine, he had months of preparations and a whole cohort of firekeepers supporting him. Sonny used the last of his essence to summon the cruel sight and turned around, ready to face the assault of the black tendrils. However, something was off. Huh? The rattling of the heavenly chains. It had grown quiet. He frowned, then took a few steps toward the edge of the island and looked down. The black tar monster was some distance away, its massive body hanging motionlessly from the heavenly tether. It was frozen and unmoving, with only its tendrils pulsating in a bizarre and nauseating rhythm. The abomination seemed to be reluctant to approach this particular island. It was as though there was an invisible boundary that it refused to cross for some reason. Sonny stared at the harrowing creature for a few moments and then snarled. He had escaped an inescapable situation once again. He had successfully fled the pursuit of the terrifying fiend. It seemed that luck was on his side, in the end. However, was it really? Sonny shivered. But what exactly can scare a corrupted monster away? Chapter 630, Wicked Warlock of the East. Sonny stared at the terrifying fiend for a few moments, then suddenly grimaced, clutched his chest, and fell to one knee. A bestial growl escaped through his sharp fangs. Arg! His heart was beating wildly, sending waves of pain rolling through his exhausted body. He felt weak and light-headed, beads of sweat glistening on his obsidian skin. This condition was only worsened by the usual sense of frailty that came from utterly depleting reserves of essence. Sonny felt infirm. God damn it. Am I having a heart attack? He groaned, remained motionless for a bit, and then slowly stood up. Still clutching his chest, he hunched awkwardly and looked around, trying to determine which island he had found himself on, and what wicked creature might have kept the corrupted monstrosity at bay. His pupils widened slightly. No way! The night was slowly advancing, and the island was drowned by the dimming resplendence of a beautiful crimson sunset. Despite only having been here once, Sonny recognized the place, the vastness of the island, the emerald grass that veiled its surface like a soft carpet, the rolling hills, the moss-covered ruins. He had reached the southern island, where the crumbling fortress lay at the estuary of the Great Chain, one of the anchors which connected the isles to the mainland of the Dream Realm far below. Well, the fortress had been ruined in the future. Currently, it might have been still standing. Such luck. Sonny was glad to learn that he had arrived at the southernmost point of the chained isles during his mad escape from the black tar fiend. However, he was still uneasy about the fact that the abomination refused to approach it. He was in no condition to fight anything, let alone a creature capable of scaring a corrupted monster. But what choice was there? Sonny glanced at the massive body of the terrifying abomination that loomed in the distance, then toward the center of the island. The choices, really, were simple. He could either jump back on the heavenly chain and try his luck in a battle against the black tar fiend, or remain on the island and risk meeting the unknown horror. He hesitated for a bit, and then started limping away from the edge. Yes, an unknown danger was almost always worse than that which was familiar. But who knew? Maybe he was going to get lucky. Maybe the unseen horror was going to turn out friendly and nice. Yeah, why not? Sure, statistically speaking, a thing like that is bound to happen one day. By the time Sonny reached the center of the island, the night had already descended upon the world, and a full moon was climbing up the velvet surface of the starlit sky. The hills became shrouded in darkness, which hid and protected him, and there was a little bit of shadow essence now, filling his three cores. The pain in his chest had subsided somewhat, but Sonny still felt weak and feverish. He was heading toward the southern edge of the island to take a look at the current status of the boundary fortress, and studied his surroundings carefully in search of any sign of danger. If there was indeed a terrible threat somewhere on the island, it would be better to discover it before it had the chance to discover him first. Cresting the top of a tall hill, Sonny suddenly froze and then crouched down. Safely veiled by the shadows, he looked at a shimmering white light that danced some distance away, in the center of a small valley that was formed by the hill he was standing on and several others. What? What is this? He hesitated for a moment, then commanded the gloomy shadow to slide off from his body and get closer to the source of light. However, the shadow hesitated too. Sonny blinked. What the hell are you waiting for? Get down there. You can run away if things go wrong. The gloomy shadow gave him a long look, then shook its head resentfully and timidly glided forward. Soon, Sonny saw a strange picture. In the center of the valley, a small fire burned, its color entirely white. In front of it, a lone human figure sat. The human's head was hung low, his face obscured by the falling hair. He was naked above the waist, his pale skin covered with dry blood. However, there seemed to be no wounds on the stranger's body. In fact, there was not a single scar on it. On a stone in front of him, a diamond sickle lay, its blade painted crimson. The image of the bloodied man, half of his body illuminated by the warm light of the dancing flame, half washed in the cold, pale moonlight, was eerie and strangely beautiful. Sonny found himself slightly hypnotized by the solemn mystery of it all, almost to the point of forgetting the danger he was in. After a while, the man let out a deep sigh, and then suddenly spoke in a bright and melodious voice. "Who is it there hiding in the shadows? Don't be so timid, friend, come out. Share the warmth of this fire with me if you wish. The night is cold and dark." A sonorous laughter rolled across the valley. "Oh, don't be scared. I won't eat you." Sonny shivered. "Keep your voice down, fool. There's something horrible hiding on this island." But then, he thought for a moment and shuddered. Unless the man himself was the unknown horror. The horror in question, meanwhile, raised his head, finally revealing his face. It was young and beautiful, with smooth, silken skin, high cheekbones, and exquisite features. The man's smile was carefree and pleasant, his eyes bright and humorous. There was a symbol of a crescent moon drawn on his forehead. Sonny recognized him immediately, of course. It was the exact same face he had seen 1,000 times, depicted on each of the miraculous coins. However, Sonny had no time to pay this revelation any attention, because something else drew all of it. It was the fact that the young man shifted slightly, turned his head, and looked directly at him. Not even at the gloomy shadow that hid some distance away from the fire, but at the distant top of the hill where Sonny himself crouched in the shadows. "See. Crap." The young man beckoned him with a finger, still smiling. "Come, come. It is rude to refuse a sincere invitation, especially one coming from such a nice person as me. Oh, where are my manners? I didn't even introduce myself. Rejoice, stranger. You are in the brilliant presence of Noctis, the great sorcerer of the East. Chapter 631. The Funniest Thing in the World. Sunny froze, unsure of what the wisest course of action would be. What to do? What to do? After meeting Sylvain, he had a heavy prejudice against crossing paths with powerful figures of the Kingdom of Hope, and Noctis was very powerful of that, he had no doubt. In fact, Sunny was pretty sure that the friendly young man who was looking at him with a charming smile was none other than one of the 7 immortal shackles of the imprisoned daemon, the mysterious lord of the East. Even without taking into account the otherworldly presence that all transcendence seemed to possess, it was easy to tell there was vast and dreadful power within Noctis, hiding behind the deceptively carefree gleam of his lustrous eyes. Plus, there was a citadel in the eastern reaches of the Chained Isles, literally called the Sanctuary of Noctis. Who else could have been the ruler there? Who else could have possessed the beautiful flying ship and had their image put on the miraculous coins? So Sunny had no desire to meet the strange immortal, even though Noctis seemed weirdly friendly and unthreatening. Actually, that only made him more terrifying. But was there even a choice? It was not like Sunny was in any shape to escape from a saint, let alone an immortal sorcerer, that even corrupted abominations seemed to be wary of. He hesitated for a bit, then sighed, rose, and headed toward the crackling fire. Noticing that, Noctis hummed in satisfaction and then slightly moved his hand. Immediately, droplets of dew flew from the grass, forming a clear stream that swirled around his body, washing the dry blood away. An exquisite silk cloak rose from the ground, wrapping itself around him. The diamond sickle whistled through the air, shaking itself clean, and hung itself on the sorcerer's belt. Sunny continued walking, still clutching his aching chest, and observed the bizarre occurrence with a deadpan expression. Dammon, why don't I know how to perform tricks like that? That would make life so much easier. Finally, under the gloating gaze of the vindictive, gloomy shadow, he walked into the circle of light and couldn't help but tremble when the saint threw a curious glance at him. It was hard to remain calm in front of a being that could obliterate you with one finger. The whole situation was sort of ridiculous, actually. Noctis looked like a pampered young man in bright silks, with an effeminate face and the body of someone who had never once exerted themselves physically. His hands were smooth and uncalloused, and his build was slender and soft, almost frail. Sunny, on the other hand, was a towering demon clad in an intricate and fearsome suit of onyx armor, his gaunt figure brimming with ferocious might. He had twisting horns, 4 powerful arms, and a mouth full of sharp fangs, his eyes completely black and inhuman. And yet it was the demon who was afraid of the pampered young man, and not the other way around. Ridiculous. Noctis studied the tenebrous demon in front of him, his smile growing wider. Ah, what a fortuitous encounter. A shadow. Did fate guide you to me, I wonder? Sunny grew very still. Fate. What does he mean? The sorcerer, meanwhile, gestured for him to sit. Sit down, Shadow. It seems that you are unwell. Rest for a bit and warm yourself. Sunny hesitated, then lowered himself to the ground, sitting across the dancing flames from the transcendent. He stole a glance at Noctis's soul to make sure that he was right to call the young man so, and saw a single resplendent core shining in his chest. That was a soul of a saint, indeed. Noctis remained silent for a while, and then asked, Say, Shadow, what is your name? Sunny lingered, then stretched a hand forward and scratched 2 runes into one of the stones surrounding the fire. Sorcerer's brows flew up. Those runes, huh? Goodness gracious. Now I am sad that I wasn't as studious as my mentors demanded. All that time ago. Those boring charlatans. Well, let's see star. No, that should be sun. Lost sun. Absence of sun, sunless. Sunny nodded, causing Noctis to beam with a prideful grin. Ha! There's indeed no one smarter than me in the Kingdom of Hope. The rumors are true. Well, of course they are true. I'm the one who paid storytellers to spread them. In any case, Sunless, what a fitting name you have. Truly a name worthy of a shadow, a little on the nose, if you ask me, but very nice nevertheless. Well done. Sonny tilted his head, staring at the saint in confusion. What the hell is this guy, just eccentric or completely insane? Noctis didn't mind being stared at, and instead seemed to enjoy it a great deal. He looked at the onyx demon in return, the smile frozen on his face. The humor in his eyes slowly disappeared, making way for a strange, dangerous gleam. Sunless, since fate itself has brought us together, can you answer me a simple question? Feeling tension spreading through his exhausted body, Sunny grew grim and then slowly nodded. This is not good. Not good at all. Damn it. Why is everyone in this place crazy? Noctis leaned forward and said, his voice deceptively calm and friendly. Tell me, do you perhaps have a knife cut from a single piece of black obsidian in your possession? Sunny shivered. How? How the hell does he know? But there was nothing he could do. The question had been asked, and now he was compelled to answer. He struggled against the flaw for as long as he could, then gritted his teeth and nodded again. The immortal sorcerer stared at Sunny for a few moments, his lustrous eyes reflecting moonlight like two shining pools of pale blue radiance. Then he suddenly threw his head back and exploded with joyful laughter, as though he had just heard the funniest joke in history. Noctis laughed so hard that tears appeared in his eyes, glistening in the moonlight like crystals. Finally, he satiated his mirth and glanced at Sunny once again, the carefree smile returning to his face. Ah, sunless fate is the funniest thing in the world, don't you think? You and I have a feeling that we are going to be great friends, Sunless, believe it. Chapter 632, Broken Heart. Sunny froze, his tired body tensing up. His vertical pupils narrowed, and breath escaped through his gritted fangs with a hissing sound. Damnation! Despite the strange reactions of the eccentric saint, he wasn't fooled. Out here in the Kingdom of Hope, there was no power greater than that of the immortal wardens that guarded its imprisoned queen. And the only weakness the immortals had were the knives that held their fates hostage. The obsidian knife was a weapon that could destroy one of the eternal shackles, and as such, it was a priceless treasure. The very concept of value was too mundane and pedestrian to be applied to it. And he had just revealed the fact that he possessed one to an infinitely more powerful being, to one of the very immortals whose lives the knife could reap. It didn't matter if the obsidian knife was meant for Noctis himself or one of the other shackles. If it contained his own fate, then the sorcerer would stop at nothing to gain control of it so that no one else could. If it contained another's, he would be able to exert influence over one of the wardens or dispose of them completely. Noctis would undoubtedly try to take the knife, but inexplicably, the sorcerer did nothing of the sort. Instead, as Sunny stared at him in confusion, Noctis relaxed and started to hum a joyful melody. Then, he suddenly clapped his hands in excitement. Ah, Sunless, how fortunate it is that I've met you. His smile dimmed a little, and his eyes, for a moment, grew dark and terrifying. Before we met, you see, I was prepared to do something rather drastic. But now, there is no need. The divination truly worked. He remained silent for a few moments, and then seamlessly switched back to his usual carefree persona. This wonderful occasion demands a celebration. Yes, we simply must celebrate while you're still alive, which won't be for long, regretfully so. Better keep it simple. Sunny flinched. What? Meanwhile, something rustled in the air, and a figure of a very tall man suddenly appeared out of the darkness. Sunny tensed, surprised that the stranger managed to approach them unnoticed. Why had he not sensed the bastard? The figure calmly stepped into the light, revealing itself to not be a man at all. Instead, it was a wooden mannequin carved into a semblance of a man, wearing an elegant livery with embroidered sleeves and hem. It had simple features and held a tray with grapes, fresh fruit, and several beautifully painted amphoras of wine. The mannequin looked disturbingly familiar. In fact, it bore a close resemblance to a far less feral, ancient, and corrupted version of a sailor doll, who had been the nightmare creatures populating Shipwreck Island before Sunny and the Firekeepers eradicated them. The strange sailor doll placed the tray in front of them, stepped back into the darkness, and froze, becoming indistinguishable from a dead piece of wood. Noctis smiled and reached out for one of the amphoras. Sunny's thoughts, meanwhile, were in turmoil. What the hell does he mean? I won't be alive for long. He opened his mouth, then closed it in frustration, and hurriedly traced several runes in the ash. What? Why? The sorcerer scowled as he tried to read them, then gave him an unapologetic smile. Why are we keeping it so simple? Yes, of course, you would be confused. See, usually I would have thrown a great feast to celebrate the occasion. I am the most gracious person in the Kingdom of Hope, after all. But sadly, we will have to be satisfied with this shameful. Sunny furiously shook his head, and then drew several more runes. Sunless, death, why? Noctis stared at him with surprise. Well, aren't you dying? That broken heart of yours is giving out. I thought that this was why you came here, to spend your last few days near his resting place. Sunny blinked a few times, trying to digest what he had just heard. Was his one remaining heart really failing? It did feel like it was on the verge of tearing apart during his escape from the black tar monster. It continued to ache dully still. And whose resting place was Noctis talking about? No, that was not important right now. He erased the previous runes and traced two more. Heart broken? Noctis frowned. Wait, do you perhaps not want to die? I didn't say anything before in order to respect your wishes, but if dying peacefully was not your intention, then why are you wasting time drinking wine with me? Sunless, are you crazy? Sunny stared at him for a few moments, unamused, his eyes full of resentment. Then he ground his fangs and wrote, No, don't know, maybe, heart, heal. The sorcerer scratched his head. You are a very strange shadow, Sunless. Well, mending a broken heart is not easy, and yours is not only broken, you also seem to have misplaced one. Until you replace the lost heart, there is no point in healing the one that remains. It will just break apart again. But where would a shadow creature like you find a suitable heart in this god-forsaken land? He sighed. The servants of shadow are all gone, and so are the servants of heart. Without them, only the greatest of healers would be able to build a heart worthy of a shadow demon from scratch. Noctis looked down dejectedly. But then, a mischievous smile appeared on his face. Luckily, I am the most gifted and renowned healer in the Kingdom of Hope. For me, creating a new heart for you won't be much of a problem. But, Sunless, despite the fact that you and I are dear friends, a favor like that is not something to be given lightly. I wouldn't want to put a strain on our friendship, you know? So you will have to do something for me too. That would only be polite, don't you think? Sunny had a feeling that he was being swindled. After all, he was an accomplished swindler himself. However, that didn't really matter. The part of Noctis's words about the inevitable failure of his one remaining heart at least rang true. Perhaps if Sunny managed to not put any excessive strain on it in the future, things would be fine. But what were the chances of him having a peaceful life in a nightmare? 0. He desperately needed a functioning heart, and better yet, 2 of them. Only then would he be back to his full strength and ready to face the challenges that lay ahead. Sunny sighed and drew several runes, already suspecting what he would hear. He wants the damned knife, doesn't he? That bastard. Sunless, do. What? Noctis looked at him for a few moments, then smiled. What he said next, however, was not what Sunny expected to hear. The sorcerer suddenly turned around and gestured south. Oh, it's nothing much, really. You see, there's an abandoned fortress on the edge of this island. All I want is for you to climb inside and remain there until dawn. Actually, it will be best if you can fall asleep, so a little nap in exchange for a new heart. Doesn't sound too bad, does it? I mean, it's just a few hours of sleep, really. What's the worst that could happen? The gloomy shadow grabbed its head in utter despair. Chapter 633, Dead Fortress. Sunny remained silent for a long time, looking at Noctis with a grim expression. Finally, he shifted and drew several runes, the onyx claw of his armored gauntlet moving through the ash with swift precision. Fortress danger inside. The sorcerer laughed. Danger, of course there is danger, but don't worry. It is nothing that you won't be able to handle. I think believe even. Regardless, there's no one in the entire Kingdom of Hope better suited for this task, thank you, Sunless. So hurry up. Time's a-wasting. Sunny scowled, unamused by the fact that Noctis avoided the question. Unwilling to let go, he growled and pointed to the runes again. The sorcerer sighed wistfully. It's not that I don't want to tell you, Sunless. It's just that there's no point. You won't remember anyway. But this will benefit us both. Trust me. This fortress once belonged to a friend of mine. He was one of Hope's shackles, just like me, and a shadow, just like you. Do you see now why I think that fate itself has brought us together? Sunny held his breath. So, I was right. Noctis is indeed one of the immortals, and, more than that, one of the original 7 had been a follower of Shadow God. Only 5 wardens were still alive, and none of them held dominion over the south, so it was safe to assume that this Shadow Lord was dead. Suddenly, the sorcerer's comment about this island being someone's resting place made more sense. If so, maybe there were some relics that the Transcendent of Shadows left behind in the fortress? That changed things. A little. Sunny hesitated for a while, and then gestured to his chest. Noctis smiled. What? Surely you are not doubting my skill. Rest assured, Sunless. I'll create a wonderful new heart for you. I'll even replace the fingers you seem to be missing as a bonus. Unless not having fingers is your preference, of course. Sunny stared at him for a few minutes, then sighed and stood up. Picking up a bunch of grapes, he glanced at the eccentric sorcerer one more time, and then headed south, toward the edge of the island where the abandoned fortress stood. You won't remember it anyway. I wonder what the hell did he mean? As he walked, Sunny noticed several clusters of beautiful white flowers growing here and there among the emerald grass. The closer to the fortress he came, the more of these flowers there were. Despite the fact that it was the middle of the night, their buds were open, filling the air with a faint but pleasant smell. A deep scowl appeared on his face. These flowers, they looked vaguely familiar. He slowly ate the sweet, succulent grapes and searched his memory for a hint of where he might have seen them. After a while, his expression turned even darker. There was an island in the eastern reaches of the Chained Isles, not too far from the sanctuary of Noctis, covered by a vast and beautiful field of such white flowers. Everyone, even the most competent cohorts of Awakened and those from the White Feather clan, avoided this island like a plague. The ground there was littered with bones of all kinds, hidden beneath the delicate white petals. As soon as a person stepped on the surface of the island, they would feel an irresistible desire to stop, rest, and fall asleep. And if they succumbed to that desire, none ever woke up. Sunny silently cursed. Is that bastard trying to kill me? But for some reason he had trouble believing that Noctis simply wanted him dead. A saint had far easier ways to kill an Awakened, let alone someone as tired and weakened as him. There was no need to go to such lengths. So, what the sorcerer had said must have been true, or at least close to it. He believed that Sunny was uniquely suited for the task, and had a good chance of accomplishing it alive. But why? What was so special about Sunny? What could he do that even a Transcendent could not? Was it because he was connected to Shadow God, as the previous owner of the fortress had been? Full of dark thoughts, he crested another hill and saw the familiar silhouette of the boundary stronghold not too far away. It was in much better condition than it had been in the future. In fact, it almost looked whole if not for the moss covering its walls, the lack of lights, and the deathly silence that enveloped it. Sunny would have thought that the castle was still inhabited by humans. The tall walls built of gray stone rose high into the night sky, and the massive gates were closed shut. The ancient fortress was bathed in the pale moonlight, looking somber and foreboding, like a cursed tomb. Sunny grimaced. Not ominous at all. Still clutching his chest, he made his way down the hill and approached the menacing stronghold. Its walls had not crumbled yet, so the path he had taken to get inside the last time did not exist yet. Full of grim unease, Sunny thrust his claws into the ancient stone and started climbing. These walls were nothing compared to the Great Wall of the Dark City. Getting to the top was not going to be hard, even for a human. And currently he wasn't even human. He was a demon, be it a dying one. Soon he finally reached the top of the wall and crouched on its lip, looking down into the empty courtyard. Here, the signs of abandonment were more pronounced. There were dust and dirt everywhere, with weeds growing through the ancient cobblestones. The fortress was desolate and hollow, devoid of anyone to inhabit and take care of it. He hesitated with a decision for a bit, and then reluctantly sent two of his shadows away to explore the stronghold. If there was indeed a powerful creature nesting inside, they would surely find it. Minutes passed in tense anticipation. The shadows glided through the empty corridors and halls of the abandoned stronghold, through its towers and dungeons. However, no matter where they looked, they did not find any sign of life. What they did find, however, were corpses. Here and there, human skeletons lay, still dressed in archaic garments and armor. There was no sign of struggle around them, no tears on their clothes, and no apparent wounds on their bodies. It just seemed as though the former garrison of the stronghold had lowered themselves to the ground and died for no reason whatsoever. All of it was just too eerie. Curse it all. Curse the damned immortals, and curse this damned place. Sonny almost turned around and ran. But then his chest pulsed with pain, reminding him of the reason for why he had come here. With a deep sigh, he jumped down from the lip of the wall and walked toward the main structure of the fortress. Time to find me a soft bed. Sonny entered the donjon, summoned the shadows back, and walked through the silent halls on his way to the higher levels of the massive tower. Once there, he walked around for a bit, searching for a suitable room, and soon found one that seemed to be both comfortable and well protected. Unceremoniously throwing a corpse in a rotten nightgown off the bed, he lay down in its place and tiredly closed his eyes. Sure, this place was beyond creepy, but he was in fact tired to the bone and in desperate need of rest. Some sleep would do him good. What's the big deal anyway? I've slept in far worse places. Before falling into the embrace of oblivion, he summoned Saint from the shadows and gave her a mental command to watch over him. After hesitating for a bit, Sonny did the same with the soul serpent. Only once the two shadows assumed guard did he allow himself to relax. In the silence of the abandoned fortress, Sonny could easily hear the strained beating of his heart. However, he was too exhausted to pay it any attention. Just a few minutes later, he was already sound asleep. And just a moment before falling into deep slumber, with his mind already half gone, he thought that he heard an unexpected sound somewhere close, but also far away. It was like the ringing of hooves on the cold stone floors. Chapter 634, Pillar of Flame. Sonny woke up just before dawn. He lay still for a while, reluctant to leave the warm embrace of the blankets. Then, with a sigh, he sat up and shivered in the morning cold. It was time to face a new day, and there was a lot to do. He had no excuses to laze about. A dull pain suddenly radiated through his chest. He looked down with a confused expression, studying the old scars covering his tan, bronze skin. I guess it's going to rain. Then, an ivory arm suddenly appeared from beneath the blankets, caressing his firm muscles. Is it morning already? Sonny smiled, grasped the hand of his wife, and nodded. Yes, my sunshine, she sighed. All right, go, get ready. I'll wake up the little devil. He remained motionless, leisurely enjoying the sight of the beauty he had somehow managed to coax into marrying a ruffian like him dressing herself, careful not to disturb the round belly where their second child slept peacefully, with not a care in the world. His smile grew a little wider. I said go. Today is not the day for your mischief. Hoodlum, have you forgotten? Sonny made a dejected face, then rose and dressed as well. When he left their quarters, the servants were already hard at work, preparing for the day. When they saw him, each bowed respectfully and greeted him with warm voices. Being subjected to all this adoration and decorum, Sonny had to put on a face worthy of a lord as well. How bothersome. The servants were going to prepare everything for the upcoming journey, but one thing he had to do himself. That was something that Sonny would not allow anyone else to perform, not for the lack of trust, but simply because it was his duty. Entering the stables, he greeted his steed and went about feeding and watering the noble beast before putting the saddle on his wide back. Sonny might have become a lord of some renown and left his turbulent past behind, but the bond between a warrior and his horse was sacred. Just because the two of them didn't have to risk their lives on a battlefield anymore didn't mean that he would forget it. When all was done, he led the horse to the courtyard and attached the weathered wooden scabbard to the saddle, the cold steel of a beautiful sword hidden safely within. Then he stared at the scabbard for some time, massaging his aching chest with a distant expression. A subtle, dark expression appeared on his face. After a while, the sound of quick steps headed his way. "Dad." Sonny turned around and grinned as he caught his son in an iron embrace. "Trying to sneak up on your poor old father. Huh, not so fast. I was sneaking up on monsters long before you were born, brat." The boy giggled, and then took a step back. He was turning 7 today, and on that occasion his mother had dressed him in the best clothes they had. The little devil almost looked like a proper child, and not a corrupted abomination sent to the mortal realm to torture his helpless parents. "Why did you have to sneak up? Too weak to kill them outright, huh?" Sonny sighed in exasperation and stared at the heavens. "Lady, help me. Why did their son have to inherit his poisonous tongue as well?" The boy, meanwhile, turned around and looked into the distance, where the beautiful silhouette of the ivory tower could already be seen in the morning haze. His eyes widened. "Dad, is it true? Am I going to see her today, the lady?" Sonny lingered for a few moments, then nodded. "Of course, you are turning 7, are you not? Today is a divine day, so you will meet our goddess to introduce yourself and pledge yourself to her service." His son frowned. "But she isn't really a goddess, is she? Won't other gods be angry with me?" Sonny laughed. "Gods. Gods are too great and mighty to know what jealousy means, kid. Why would they mind? Lady Hope gives us shelter and safety, protects us from the corruption, from war, famine, plague, and even ourselves. If that is not something worthy of worship, then I don't know what is." With that, he jumped into the saddle and then lifted the boy to sit in front of him. "Let's go." They left the manor and followed the road of white stones through a peaceful forest and up the hill. The horse walked forward at a steady pace, easily bearing the weight of 2 riders. Sunshine fell through the canopy of leaves in wide beams, making their surroundings look like a fairy tale. Sonny was enjoying the beauty of the forest and its tranquility. A long time ago, before coming to the Kingdom of Hope, he had known neither. His life had been nothing but bloodshed and pain, battle after battle, war after war. Only after coming to this realm and deciding to remain here did he learn the truth of how joyous life could be, especially when shared with those you love. His son, however, didn't know anything about strife and darkness. This peace was all he had ever known. For that reason, he was extremely bored. The boy fidgeted for a few minutes, then stared at the hilt of Sonny's sword. "One day I'm going to have a sword of my own. It will be way bigger and sharper than yours, old man. Mark my words." Sonny laughed. "What do you need a sword for?" His son glanced at him with confusion. "What do you mean? What for?" "To become an awakened, a warrior like you." Sonny looked away and didn't respond for a while. His eyes grew distant. His heart ached. Why did it ache so much today? "I was a warrior once, true. But I never chose to be a warrior. I just became one to survive. In the Kingdom of Hope, you don't need to fight, suffer, and kill others to live a long and happy life. Why would you still want to be a warrior?" The boy fell silent, a comically thoughtful frown appearing on his face. He turned away and didn't say anything else for a while. Sonny doubted that his son really understood what he meant, and he hoped that the boy never would. Closing his eyes, he said a silent prayer. "Hail to you, desire, demon of hope. Please, hear my yearning. Protect my son from all the horrors of the world and save him, as you have saved me." Silently, the 3 of them, the man, the boy, and the horse, left the forest and climbed the tall hill. From its top, a breathtaking sight opened before them. In front of them, a vast plain was bathed in sunlight, emerald grass shining with the morning dew. Here and there, farmsteads and fields stood, golden wheat swaying in the wind. Sparkling ribbons of rivers cut the plain, and in the distance, a beautiful city built of white stone rose from the ground, with a magnificent pagoda towering above it. Sonny couldn't help but smile. No matter how many times he saw it, he couldn't help but feel a little bit sentimental. "Hey, Do you want to wave to your mother? I'm sure she's looking in this direction right now." His son glanced at him with a pitying expression. "Are you crazy? She won't see us. We're too far away." Sonny laughed. "Says who?" He turned around and looked back at a similar landscape that lay behind them. Gazing past the forest, he saw the small town and a humble stone manor standing near it. From this distance, the building looked like a toy. He raised his hand and waved. "Hey, Dad!" Sonny scoffed. "What? Are you going to mock me some more?" The boy shook his head. "No, it's just, what is wrong with the sky? It looks funny." "Huh?" Sonny raised his head, then frowned in confusion. The sky, indeed, looked funny. The sun was still climbing up, but there seemed to be a second one right above them, swelling with incandescent light. The sky itself was growing brighter and brighter, as if permeated with intense heat. The clouds were all gone. A gust of hot wind suddenly blew past them. His eyes suddenly narrowed. Wait! In the next second, a colossal pillar of incandescent flame suddenly fell from the sky, piercing the plain and shattering the land like glass. A blinding flash drowned the world in white, and through it a terrible sound rolled across the forest. Deafened, Sonny felt his son screaming, but could not hear his voice. At the point where the pillar of flame fell, the ground itself was split open and thrown into the air. Colossal pieces of melted earth raining down fire, ash, and death. The hill on which they stood shook, and then shifted, throwing Sonny off the horse. No, no, no. Still dazed, he tried to find his son but failed. Instead, his gaze fell on the small town and the stone manor that stood in the distance. As Sonny watched in horror, the ground opened up, with fountains of fire shooting into the sky. The houses were instantly devoured by the flames and incinerated, turning into clouds of ash. No, no, no. In the next moment, the whole hill crumbled. The last thing Sonny saw before being smothered by the avalanche of scorching earth was the fragile figure of his son being swallowed by flames. No. And then he died. Pain, pain, pain. Why did his heart hurt so much? Sonny opened his eyes in the darkness and sat down, throwing the furs aside. He stared at his feeble chest, then touched it with a shaking hand, surprised. Since when did his chest start to ache during the night? Ah, being old is not fun. Chasing the remnants of a terrible nightmare away. He struggled to sit up and massaged his joints for a while, waiting until some flexibility returned to them. Then, he slowly stood up and closed his eyes, listening to the sounds of the sacred grove that enveloped him. Well, at least he woke up alive, at his age. That was already an accomplishment. If only his heart didn't ache so much. But that was just what being old meant. Every dawn brought a new ache. Actually, Sonny would have been more scared if he woke up and suddenly felt perfectly fine. In any case, it was time to face a new day. Chapter 635, The Will of Gods. Using a wooden cane, Sonny walked out of his hut and breathed in the clear, sweet air of the sacred grove. The ancient trees rustled gently, as if greeting him. The forest was slowly waking up, emerald leaves longing to be bathed in the warmth of the sun once more. A chilly fog was flowing between the mighty trunks, suffused with the vibrant lilac light of the early dawn. The nightingales sang cheerfully, jumping from branch to branch. The sight of it was familiar, beautiful, and calming. Truly, the Grove of Heart God was the jewel of the Kingdom of Hope. How lucky he was to have been born and spend most of his life here. These trees had stood upon the ancient land before it had been shattered, weathered the terrible cataclysm of Desire's imprisonment, and were going to remain standing here long after he was dead and forgotten, his bones buried at their roots. Now that Sonny was old and didn't have a lot of time left to live, that thought was very comforting. A human's life might be fleeting, but the beautiful grove was eternal. He patted one of the ancient oaks as an old friend, sighed, and limped toward the water spring to fill his jug. Since Sonny's hut stood at the outskirts of the grove, he could see the edge of the island through the spaces between the tree trunks. As always, it rose and fell slowly, the heavenly chains rattling from time to time. Everything was just as usual, which was the very best thing in the world. Sonny had lived a long life. Some of it was peaceful, and some of it was turbulent. But luckily, the turbulent times had not visited this quiet forest for a long, long time, and that was the only thing that he had always wanted, to live a quiet and tranquil life, far away from all the strife and misfortune of the ever-changing world. Change, always brought ruin on its wings. Sonny wanted no part of it. However, today, his desires were not meant to come true. Something unexpected did happen, disturbing the familiar routine of his day. At the very edge of the island, a mighty black steed suddenly appeared, as if jumping from below where a giant chain connected to the soil of the sacred grove. He walked forward at a steady pace, approaching the line of ancient trees. The steed had no saddle, but there was a rider on his back. A pretty young woman in a simple red tunic sat there, her ivory legs svelte and bare. She had a graceful figure, a face so lovely that it simply demanded to be gazed upon, and chestnut hair that fell down like a silken waterfall. Sonny stared at the young woman, mesmerized by her beauty. Then he scoffed and shook his head. "What are you even doing, old fool? Your days of ogling pretty girls are long over. This beauty is young enough to be your granddaughter. Have some shame, you vile lecher." He chuckled wryly, and then changed his course to greet the unexpected guest. A dozen meters or so away from the line of trees, the young beauty stopped her horse, jumped down with breathtaking grace, and knelt in the soft grass, looking down as other pilgrims would usually do. Sonny made his way toward the girl, panting a little from the strain, and tried to put on a smile worthy of an enlightened elder. For some reason, the closer he got to the beauty, the worse his heart ached. "Ah, what's wrong with this frail body of mine today? Greetings, young lady. Welcome. What brings you to the Heart Grove? Tell this old man your worries. Maybe I'll be able to help." The beauty did not raise her head, still looking down, as if to show her respect and reverence. Her voice, when she spoke, was melodious and calm. However, Sonny had been meeting pilgrims like her for many decades. All of them came here overwhelmed by sorrows and regret. That was why they sought out a passage to the sacred grove. This was a place of solace. He could sense a deep ocean of darkness hiding behind the facade of calmness the young woman had put on, too. She said, "I seek audience with the Lady of the Grove." Sonny lingered for a bit, then sighed. So young and yet so troubled, how sad. Then he leaned on his cane and smiled. "Well, she ought to be up and about by now. How about that? I'll wait with you until the lady arrives." The young beauty didn't answer, and simply continued to stare down, still like a statue. Her breathing was deep and steady. Even her scary black horse seemed patient and indifferent. Suddenly, Sonny felt a strange unease. He took a closer look at the girl and frowned. "Do I have dementia now? What in the name of hope is that?" His eyes seemed to be playing tricks on him. Sonny could swear that he saw a radiant sphere of light burning inside the young beauty's chest. Not that he was looking in that direction. Without any reason, his hand suddenly stretched sideways, his palm opening as if waiting to grasp something out of the air. Sonny stared at it in confusion. "Weird. What are you doing, stupid hand?" He awkwardly hid the willful hand behind his back and cleared his throat. Maybe he didn't quite recover from that terrible nightmare yet. As he did so, the young woman suddenly spoke, her head still bowed. "Tell me, have you ever seen the ivory tower?" What an unexpected question. Sonny grinned. "Oh, sure. When I was a senseless youth, not much older than you. It might not look like it, but this elder was quite a wastrel once. I ran away from home and went on an adventure. That was when I saw the Ivory City, and many other things. But eventually, I came back to this grove. There is nowhere better than home, I believe." He thought for a few moments, and then said, "Why do you ask?" The young woman remained silent for a while. "I heard that there's an evil demon locked inside the tower, that the gods put her there as a punishment for her malevolence, corruption, and pride. Do you think it's true?" Sonny chuckled. "Ah, that. Sometimes I forget how much knowledge has been lost by us, the inhabitants of the Kingdom of Hope. Yes, young lady, there is indeed a demon imprisoned within the ivory tower. However, she was never evil, malevolent, or corrupt. In fact, Hope was very kind and generous to us humans." The beauty shifted slightly. "Oh, why did the gods punish her then?" Sunny sighed dejectedly. That is the question, isn't it? Why destroy this land and put its kind lady in shackles? Who knows if mortals like us could know the will of gods? Then, maybe, we'd be gods instead. There it was again. The radiant flame in the young woman's chest. He wasn't imagining things. It was really there. Sunny was about to try and get a better look, uncaring of how improper such an attempt would seem, but at that moment, a dearly familiar voice came from behind him. However, he had never heard that voice sound so somber and grave. The Lady of the Grove said, "Why are you here, Solvain?" Chapter 636. Desecration. "Why have you come here, Solvain?" Sunny turned around, looking at the delicate woman who stood behind him, her dress woven out of simple green fabric, a girdle of tree bark wrapped around her thin waist. Despite looking only slightly older than their guest, with soft skin and sparkling hazel eyes, she had a calm and confident presence about her that brought peace and a feeling of safety to all who surrounded her. The woman looked beautiful, wise, and young. So young. She also resembled Sunny very much. As always, seeing her brought both warm joy and deep sadness to his heart. Sunny smiled, hiding his sorrow, then said in a tone most gentle and loving, "Hey, Mom, we have a guest." The Lady of the Grove, his mother, looked at him for a short moment and then answered in a voice that rang with tension and urgency, "Get away from her, child, now." Sunny frowned, confused, then did as he was told, arduously pushing his old body forward with the help of the cane. His heart was sending pulses of pain radiating through his chest. Even walking was hard today. Behind him, a dark smile appeared on the face of the young beauty whom his mother called Solvain. She slowly rose from the grass and faced the Lady of the Grove, her radiant eyes burning with grim light. "You must know why I came here. There is no need to pretend, Adre." Sunny finally reached his mother and stood beside her, turning around to look at the strange pilgrim. Something isn't right. How does she know my mother's name? Was she perhaps a powerful awakened? Well, whoever she was, the eternal guardian of the sacred grove was not going to let things get too out of hand. She was not only his mother, but also transcendent Adre, the blessed of heart god, after all. So there was no reason to worry. Nothing terrible ever happened in the sacred grove. His thoughts were interrupted by the fact that suddenly, another brilliant sphere of light appeared in view, this one inside the body of his own mother. Sunny stared at her back for a few moments, then glanced at Solvain. He even looked at the horse. "Huh?" Meanwhile, the smile disappeared from Solvain's beautiful face. Her voice turned cold and sharp as she said, "I have heard rumors that across all of the Kingdom of Hope, a cult of her followers was slowly spreading like a virulent plague. Imagine my surprise, my indignation, my rage, when I discovered that you were the source of this disease. You." Sunny's face darkened. So that's what this is all about. He had warned his mother that this might happen. Saying anything good about a daemon was tantamount to offending the gods these days. Maybe he should have followed his own advice and kept his mouth shut earlier. Damnation. Solvain, meanwhile, clenched her fists. "I came here wishing to be proven wrong, but instead saw that the accusations were true. Your own son is infected by this heresy. How could you betray us so? You have created a cult of daemon worshippers. You have nurtured the very thing that we were created to prevent." The Lady of the Grove scowled. "So what if I did? Do you think, perhaps, that I have forgotten the solemn oath we had given? No. You are the ones who are blind to the will of the Lord of Light. You are the ones who have failed in your duty." Solvain stared at the delicate woman in the green dress for a while, her expression grim. Then, she slowly shook her head. "You are so broken. How did you allow your soul to get so twisted? You, out of all of us, should have been the last to become lost. Your God should have protected you. He is the God of souls, is he not?" Sunny heard his mother chuckle, her voice devoid of amusement. "Be done with it, Solvain. Did you not say that there was no need for us to pretend? Just say what you have come to say, and leave this place. War isn't welcomed here." The young beauty in a red tunic remained silent for a long time, then slowly raised her hand. Sonny frowned, noticing that there was now a strange knife forged out of a single strip of dull metal in it. Where did it come from? His mother suddenly trembled. He had never seen her afraid before. You wouldn't dare. Solvain gritted her teeth. You forced my hand, Adre. None of us wanted this. But in the end, they all agreed. The lady of the grove fell silent, then shook her head. You lie. Noctis would never abandon me. She took a step forward and smiled. No one agreed. You are here of your own will, with none of the other chain lords giving their permission. Do you really think that they would allow something like that to happen? No matter which one of us falls, the one who remains will no longer be fateless. The balance of power between us seven will be irrevocably broken, obliterated. Are you mad? Can you even imagine what kind of disaster will follow? But then, her voice trailed off, and she stumbled. Her beautiful hazel eyes widened. Sonny shivered, feeling that just then something had gone terribly, terribly wrong. His mother stared at Solvain, her face growing deathly pale. And then, she whispered, Unless you do better than any of us. Oh, Solvain, how ruthless you are. Sonny felt his heartache growing stronger. There was a cold sensation grasping his chest, making him clutch at it with a pained grimace. Arg, what are they even talking about? I don't understand what is going on. Adra of the Sacred Grove looked down for a long time, then spoke. Her voice was quiet and full of sorrow. I see now. I understand. I should have known that out of all of us, you are the bravest. This sacrifice, Solvain, even in the realm of shadows, I won't forget it. With that, she turned to Sonny, who was really confused by what was happening, and smiled sadly. And you, I'm sorry, child. Please forgive me if you can. With that, his mother faced the beauty in the red tunic and raised her delicate hand, a knife carved out of a single piece of wood suddenly appearing in it, as though out of nowhere. Her voice grew firm and determined. However, Solvain, you should have never challenged me on this hallowed ground. I won't give up without a fight, and neither will my grove. The young woman facing her smiled, her radiant eyes shining with a furious light. Prove it. Mom. Sonny crawled through the ash, suffocating on bitter smoke. Tears streamed down his wrinkled cheeks, evaporating because of the terrible heat. His heart ached. Oh, it ached so horribly. All of him was in pain, and all around him, the sacred grove burned, enveloped by incinerating, raging fire. He could hear the screams of its inhabitants echoing in the dim darkness, humans and beasts alike, burning alive as their whole world was being slowly turned into ash. How can this be? How? Pushing himself forward with the weak hands of a useless old man, he crawled toward the delicate figure lying on the ground a few meters, so far away. He refused to die before he reached it. The ground was scorching his palms, which were now covered in terrible blisters, but he persisted, unwilling to give up. Mom. And then finally, he reached her. The lady of the grove lay dead amidst the fire, shards of a strange iron dagger sizzling in the blood-soaked mud around her. Swallowing tears, Sonny awkwardly hugged her body and let out a stifled howl. Why did it feel so familiar? As though he had felt this pain once, a long time ago, already in another world. Why are you dead? Weren't you supposed to be immortal? How can this be? No, this is just a bad dream, a nightmare. I need to wake up. Wake up, you old fool. Wake up. But no matter what he did, he couldn't. Even if it was just a nightmare, he was trapped in it, unable to escape. Trapped in a nightmare. As this strange thought rang in his mind, a trunk of an ancient tree suddenly fell nearby, a whirlwind of fiery sparks and burning debris raising into the air. Sonny stared at it, feeling his vision darken and his thoughts disappear one after another. He was coughing, unable to stop. He couldn't breathe. He was suffocating. How did this happen? The old man stared at the burning forest, his eyes aflame with grief and mad disbelief. How could the sacred grove be destroyed? Wasn't it supposed to stand tall, beautiful and tranquil, long after he was dead? Wasn't it supposed to outlive him? A sense of utter, Lightless sorrow and despair drowned his mind, just like smoke was drowning his lungs and pain was drowning his body. This is a nightmare. Just a nightmare. It can't be real. No, no, no. That bitter thought was the last one that appeared in Sonny's mind before he fell into the searing darkness. And in that darkness, alone and hurting, he died. Pain, pain, pain. Terrible, torturous pain. His heart was in pain, but so was the rest of him. Sonny couldn't open his eyes because they were glued together with dried blood. But if he did, all he would see would be the dark walls of a dungeon cell where he was strapped to a rusty torture device, red-hot metal spikes thrust into his body. Lost and forgotten, far away from the light of the blessed sun. A familiar voice invaded his ears, making him shudder. "Ah, you're awake. Good. You've been out of it for so long this time, my friend. Shall we continue?" More torture. Sonny sighed, knowing what awaited him all too well. He could barely remember who he was before ending up in this cold dungeon, or why he was being tormented by the owner of the cursed voice. All he knew was pain, darkness, and despair. However, this time, all of it didn't seem so terrible. What could have been worse than the harrowing nightmare he had just seen? Solvane, Adre, Noctis, the names sounded familiar. Had he known these people once, perhaps? Before this hell, if anything even existed outside of it, of course. In any case, that didn't matter. All that mattered was pain, torment, and hopelessness. He gritted his teeth. It was time to face a new day. Chapter 637, Iron Cage. The torture continued without end. Day after day, night after night. Sonny screamed when he had the voice, and remained silent when he lost it. A long time ago, decades ago, he still had pride, and endured the torment without giving the torturer the satisfaction of hearing him howl, cry, and beg. But there was no point. Pride had no place here, only pain. Anyone should have died from the inhuman agony he was subjected to and the terrible wounds dealt to his body. But Sonny didn't die, was unable to die, and so there was no end to his anguish. Every morning his wounds were gone, as if he was born anew. Every morning the torturer returned, and the cycle continued. The torturer himself never asked Sonny any questions. It was as though he was tormenting his prisoner just for the sake of torment. However, the master of the dungeon never seemed to enjoy his cruelty. He never reveled in the agony of his victim, and instead seemed almost sad while performing his duties. Why was this happening? How long had it been happening? When would this never-ending nightmare end? Never-ending nightmare. Sonny didn't know. He barely knew himself anymore. All he knew was fear, darkness, and pain. Lord, save me. On one of these days, he opened his eyes to see the torturer entering the cell. His personal executioner was tall and noble in bearing, with skin as white as ivory, lustrous golden hair, and amber eyes that were full of calmness, conviction, and melancholy. Just like always, the torturer started preparing his tools, and just like always, Sonny strained his mangled body, pointlessly trying to break free of his shackles. But this time, something unexpected happened. Sonny froze and stared at the radiant man in front of him, his eyes widening. Can this be? Just like in the harrowing nightmare he had seen a few days ago, there was a beautiful sphere of light burning within the torturer's chest. Its splendor washed over Sonny, making the terrible pain recede for a moment. A weak, pale smile found its way onto his face. Sonny bathed in the light and whispered, "Sun." Oh, how he had longed to see the sun again. The torturer froze, then slowly turned to him. His amber eyes shone with sudden emotion. "You are speaking again." He took a tentative step forward and studied Sonny's face, then gently caressed it. "Brother, my brother, how good it is to hear your voice once more." Sonny shivered. "Brother? Are we brothers?" He was weak and confused. Thoughts danced chaotically in his broken mind, fragile like snowflakes in the summer's heat. He found it hard to concentrate on anything, even if he wanted to, but he didn't want to. Not for a long time. The torturer smiled sadly. "Have you forgotten even me?" Sonny frowned, trying to remember. Brother? Did he have a brother? Yes, He used to, once. His brother was noble, valiant, and wise. His brother was blessed by the Lord of Light. He was entrusted with a sacred duty. And so was Sunny himself. Or maybe he was just remembering shattered fragments of old nightmares. Who could tell? He weakly shook his head. If we are brothers, then why? Why are you torturing me? The torturer remained silent for a while, then laughed sadly. Ah, that old question. You haven't asked it in decades. He leaned forward and looked at Sunny with sorrow. Don't you remember? You were the one who asked me to do this after all. Sunny's pupils widened. No, no, I asked you. The torturer nodded. As penitence, for the terrible sin you committed, for betraying the trust of the Lord of Light. Was it a century ago? Yes, almost. He turned away and picked up a long blade, thrusting it into the flames that burned furiously in a golden brazier. It has been almost a century since you abandoned me. Ah, enduring our duty alone was not easy, my brother. It wasn't easy at all, but I never broke my word to you. Sunny stared as the blade was slowly starting to glow inside the flames. Knowing that it would be soon thrust into his flesh instead, he shuddered. If I asked you, then stop. I don't want it anymore. The torturer looked down, then smiled darkly. Stop, but we can't stop. Not until you answered the question. Sunny's eyes were glued to the blade. He whispered, Question? What question? His brother was silent for a bit, and then asked, Where is that which was entrusted to us by the Lord? What have you done with the knives? Knives? What knives? Sunny couldn't recall any knife, and could only think about the one that was already glowing red in the golden brazier. I don't know. His torturer sighed. Then your penitence can't stop. With that, he took the blade out of the fire and brought it to Sunny's chest, where an aching heart was beating wildly like a caged beast. Sunny searched his memory, desperate for the torture to end. No, he couldn't remember. A split second before the tip of the blade cut his skin, he suddenly shouted, Shadow! Shadow stole it. The ember knife. Shadow took it from me. It was his fault. His. The blade froze without reaching Sunny's flesh. The torturer looked away, a somber expression on his face. It is good that you finally spoke, however. That mystery had been revealed some time ago. After all, Shadow is long dead. He glanced at Sunny, then asked coldly, But what of the other? Where is the ivory knife that I have given you? Did Shadow steal it as well? Sunny shivered, then slowly shook his head. No, I hid it. I hid it far away. His brother closed his eyes. Where did you hide it? Tears streamed down Sunny's face. He strained in his bindings, desperately trying to free himself. I don't remember. I don't know. The torturer sighed, then dropped the searing blade to the ground. Useless. This is all useless. A century of this and you're still resisting. He grabbed his head and groaned, then suddenly laughed, his voice echoing from the stone walls of the dungeon. I'm tired. I'm more tired of this than you are, brother. Why have you deserted me? I can't save you, no matter what I do. I can't clear away your guilt. I can't redeem you in the eyes of the Lord. He fell silent, and slowly, his face turned calm and solemn. Then, he glanced at Sunny and said, mad resolve shining in his eyes, A century is enough. Going further will only break what is left of you, my dear brother. If we can't redeem your sin, then we must burn it away. The blessing of the fire, we will invent our own instead of the one you lost. A day finally came when Sunny was freed from his bindings and dragged away from the dungeon cell. He was too weak to fight his jailers and saw no point in it. He didn't really understand what was happening and was just glad to finally leave the darkness of the torture chamber. He was so happy that tears fell from his amber eyes. Sunny was brought to a vast chamber that was full of terrible heat and drowned by an angry orange glow. Strange, what a strange place. In front of him was a giant pit filled with molten steel. There were giant firs blowing a constant stream of wind into the fire below. He heard the sound of hooves ringing on the stones and saw a mighty horse with blinders on his eyes. walk constantly in circles, spinning the wooden wheel it was attached to, which in turn worked the furs. In front of the pit, a strange iron cage lay on the floor. It was made in the shape of a man's body and opened, revealing the human-shaped emptiness within. "What is this?" "Be brave, my brother." Sonny flinched, hearing the familiar voice. He turned his head and saw the torturer standing beside him, with a dark and determined expression on his face. "Today, we will burn away your sin. We will make you into the tool of the gods once more." "I don't understand." Before Sonny could realize what was happening, he was placed into the strange cage, which was then closed shut, leaving him in utter darkness. His new prison hugged his body like a metal carapace. He couldn't move or see anything. He was like a soul encased inside the body of an Iron Man. Panicking, Sonny tried to struggle against his metal prison, but it was of no use. He heard the sound of chains and felt himself being raised into the air. What? And then he was lowered down, 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 down into the giant pit of molten metal. The outsides of his cage grew hot, and then searing, and then scorching, incinerating, immolating. Locked within the incandescent iron cage, Sonny screamed and screamed, his flesh constantly burning and restoring itself, his broken mind drowning in agony and heat in the fire. But no matter how much he screamed, the burning was eternal, just like he himself was. Burning, he was burning. Sonny woke up with a scream, still enveloped in the horror of the nightmare. He shuddered, then clutched at his chest, which was full of sharp, tearing pain. Arg. The shadows rustled around him, distressed by the sudden scream of their master. A nightmare, huh? I haven't had one in centuries. He grimaced, and then stood up, listening to the rattling of the heavenly chains in the distance. It was time to face a new day, hopefully his last. Chapter 638. Dream After Dream. Sonny walked through the empty halls of his castle, shrouded in shadows. Wherever he passed, the pale radiance of moonlight disappeared, devoured by the tide of flowing darkness. His steps were silent, and so were his thoughts. Raising a hand clad in a glove of black silk, he traced his fingers across the intricate engravings, not caring to remember the events depicted on the ancient stone walls. They were his triumphs and his victories, etched into the annals of history, but all of it was so distant and had happened so long ago at the dawn of the Age of Heroes. He had been a hero once too, battling the remnants of the corruption across the mortal realms. He had been cunning and fearless, valiant and unrelenting, full of faith and hope. The Age of Heroes was over, but Sonny still remained. By now, all of his servants and warriors had long left, taking the treasures he did not care about anymore with them. The halls of the castle were populated by shadows, and nothing else. Well, except for one loyal fool who was too stubborn to get the hint. "Sorry, kid. You should have found a better master." Damnation, why did his heart suddenly hurt so much? Sonny opened the gates to the courtyard, not bothering to close them as he left. This castle of his would be, without a doubt, overtaken by one of the other chain lords soon enough. Or maybe even a ragtag gang of random bandits. He did not care too much about it either. Standing in the darkness, Sonny hesitated, and then took out 2 knives from the hidden sheaths on his forearms. One seemed to be cut from a single piece of ghostly glass, the other from beautiful ember. One was the knife entrusted to him by the Lord of Light, and the other was the one he had stolen. The nightmare he had seen must have been because of a sense of guilt he had not known he felt. But why would he? The fool only had himself to blame for losing the knife to Sonny. And surely the 2 brothers were not demented enough to come up with something that distasteful. At least not yet. Sonny sighed and shook his head, indifferent to the fate of the other immortals. Then he turned slightly and watched as a tall figure appeared from the darkness. A towering demon with pale gray skin, 4 arms, and twisting horns approached him and bowed his head, a sorrowful expression contorting the bestial lines of his face. Sonny smiled. "Don't look so glum, kid. You knew that this would happen eventually." The demon didn't answer. Not that he was able to. With another sigh, Sonny hid the ember knife in its sheath and handed the glass one to the tall creature, who hesitated for a few moments and took it with fear and reverence. "Be careful not to drop it. A god made that knife, you know. It is a very precious thing, precious enough that even you aren't suited to wield it. The others will eat you alive if they ever find out." He looked northeast, considering something, and then added, "Take it to the temple of the chalice and give it to the war maiden. Tell her that we'll meet again in the realm of shadows. That is my last order to you, kid. After that, you will be free." The demon clenched his fists, then slowly shook his head. Sonny chuckled. "And yet this is how it has to be. Now go. Your master commands you." The creature looked down, then growled sorrowfully and disappeared into the darkness. Sonny watched him go. Soon the towering demon left the castle, crossed the hills of emerald grass, and climbed down to one of the chains leading away from the island. Making sure that the creature was gone, Sonny recalled his shadow scouts and then clicked his tongue. Tisk, he didn't even look back once. What a heartless little imp. With that, he walked toward the gates of the castle, followed by a sea of shadows. As he walked, a beautiful black stallion rose from them, his mane as dark as night, with long horns protruding from his head and his teeth resembling that of a wolf more than that of a normal horse. The stallion's eyes burned with menacing crimson flames. Sonny smiled. "Greetings, old friend. Will you let me ride on your back one last time?" He jumped into the saddle and sent his terrifying steed galloping across the land. They flew through shadows and raced across the chains that swayed between two lightless skies, jumping from one island to another, full of bliss and exhilaration of speed. Ah, this is the one thing I will miss. After centuries of being burdened by the crushing weight of knowledge and duty, Sonny was finally free and at peace. The night sky above him was vast and beautiful, and so was the one below. Everything was perfect except for one thing. Why did his heart have to hurt so much? Surely he didn't have any regrets left. Just before dawn approached, they reached a secluded and lonesome island. Sonny jumped off the horse, patted him on the back, and said his farewells. The steed then turned into a vast, sprawling shadow and disappeared, as though he had never existed at all. The black stallion even made an attempt to hide his heartbreaking grief, to not burden his creator with it, and not turn their final farewell bitter. Sonny remained still for a few moments, and then made his way to the edge of the island. There, he undid the strings of his tunic and bared his chest, then knelt, looking down into the endless darkness of the sky below, the divine flames burning in its depths. The others didn't know yet what awaited them all, none except for maybe Solvane, who had sealed their fates with her merciless hand. Had she known the consequences of her cruel choice, or had she been simply too blind to see? In any case, Sonny wanted no part of what was to come. He had always prided himself on being a cheat and a coward, and so he chose an easy way out. The moon was already gone, and the sun had not yet risen. In this darkest of hours, he was surrounded by nothing except shadows and the singing of the wind. A deep sigh escaped from his lips, came like dew, disappears like dew. With that, Sonny raised his hand and, without even flinching, thrust the beautiful ember knife through the intricate scales of the serpent that coiled around his chest. As terrible pain drowned his mind with agony, a pale smile appeared on his face. "Free. I am, finally, free." His body swayed, and then fell down into the endless abyss of the sky below, disappearing from the edge of the island just as the first ray of sunlight appeared over the horizon. Sonny fell into absolute darkness. Wrapped in its soothing embrace, finally, he died. Sonny woke up. His chest hurt, for some reason, but he couldn't allow himself to sleep any longer. It was time to face a new... What the hell? Doesn't this seem awfully familiar? Chapter 639, Never-Ending Nightmare. Sonny woke up from a nightmare where he was a shadow that had lost the will to live, who woke up from a nightmare where he was a prince being drowned in a fiery tomb of molten steel, who woke up from a nightmare where he was an old man dying as he held the body of his murdered mother, who woke up from a nightmare where he was a mortal, watching his world being destroyed by a god. Soon enough, Sonny found himself tied to a stake, with fire spreading through the pile of tinder beneath his bare feet, as a crowd of people whom he had considered friends and neighbors watched with demented glee. All he could do was struggle desperately against his bonds and pray that the smoke would smother him before the flames reached his flesh. But his prayers were not answered. Screaming from inside the fire, he died. It was time to face a new day. Sunny fought desperately as sharp fangs tore his flesh apart as he was being eaten alive. But no matter how much he struggled, it was of no use. The monster was just too strong and mad and cruel. And then he died. It was time to face a new day again. Sunny drowned, a heavy chain tied around his legs. Sunny bled to death on a battlefield, suffering from terrible thirst and too weak to move. Hungry crows tearing at his face with sharp beaks. Sunny watched his entire family be executed before being hanged from the walls of a somber fortress, thrown into the boundless darkness of the sky below by his heartless mother. Sunny died of hunger, thirst, and fear, too tired to scream or cry. Sunny was killed and turned into a wooden doll by a vengeful sorcerer, and then killed again after an eternity of silent servitude, the doll burning to ashes as it fell into an ocean of white flames. His heart was pierced with an obsidian knife on an altar made of pure darkness. His body was cleaved apart by the blade of a giant warrior in a red, tattered robe, while the jubilant crowd cheered from the stone seats of an ancient theater. It was time to face a new day again. The nightmares never ended, bleeding into one another. Each time, Sunny woke up sure that the agony he had experienced was just a harrowing dream. But very soon, his waking life would turn into pure horror itself. And then, he would die. And then, it would be time to face a new day again. Sunny dreamt of being mighty and weak, young and old, men and women, humans and beasts. Their end was always the same. Everywhere he went, everywhere he fled, no matter who he was, there was only pain and death. And madness. It was as though everyone he met was infected by a terrible, unexplainable madness. The whole world was mad, and he was slowly going mad too. After a while, he found that waking up was getting harder and harder. Sometimes, he failed to differentiate which of his lives were real and which ones he had just dreamt of. Even though the horrors he had experienced seemed like a nightmare, their weight accumulated, slowly breaking his spirit apart. His faces changed, his memories changed, but one thing always remained the same: the terror. The ever-present, chilling terror of waking up from a nightmare only to be thrust into a worse one instead. And two other things remained the same, as well: the pain in his chest and the spheres of light that he saw from time to time burning inside someone's soul. Sunny was a soldier in a war between the Ivory City and the Red Colosseum. Consumed by terror, he watched as a brilliant colossus made of lustrous steel stepped forward, making the whole island shake. A giant metal hand slowly moved forward, catching a swift flying ship and crushing the vessel in its enormous fist. And then, the Iron Giant took another step. Suddenly the sky disappeared, replaced by a vast expanse of polished metal. The Colossus brought his foot down, crushing Sunny and all of his comrades into a bloody paste. Sunny died, and then he woke up with a scream. It was time to face a new day again. That was too much. He shivered, remembering the terrifying sight of the steel giant advancing toward the trembling row of soldiers, who would be mad enough to challenge the indestructible Sun Prince. Well, he knew who. The warmongers were all insane, each and every one of them. Some said that they had been different and called by another name once, that they had been valiant and brave, champions who protected the kingdom of hope from the beasts of corruption. But he didn't really believe it. As long as Sunny was alive, and as long as his father was alive, and his grandfather as well, the warmongers had been the same, bloodthirsty monsters wearing human skins. Luckily, the war was raging far away from here. In the northern reaches of the Kingdom of Hope, people didn't have to worry about the madness of the followers of war and the misguided righteousness of the followers of Sun. Granted, they had their own worries, shuddering and still in the grasp of the nightmare. Sunny massaged his aching chest and rose. Today, his lady was going to meet with the emissaries of the Night Temple. It was a high honor, but also not without risk. As a knight tasked with protecting her, Sunny had to be ready for anything. Why? Why does my heart hurt so much today? Shivering, he reached for his clothes. No! Sunny and a young girl in a beautiful silk dress that was passed down to her from her mother, and for that reason a little bit too long for the girl's awkward figure, had nowhere else to run. The pursuers, who had already slaughtered the rest of their party, chased them to the very edge of the island. Now there was nothing but the darkness of the sky below in front of them. And behind them, steel hooves were already ringing on the stones, growing closer and closer. The teenage girl stared into the bottomless abyss, then turned to him. Her lips trembled. "Sir, what should we do?" Her face was soft and pale, not yet touched by the sharpness of maturity. Her eyes, usually so gentle and bright, were now dull and full of fear. Sunny hesitated, then drew his sword and turned his back to the abyss. "Don't be afraid, my lady. I'm with you." He said those empty words, knowing full well that it was a lie. He was just one man. He was not even an awakened. What could a mundane swordsman like him do against this foe? The girl, young as she was, knew that he was lying too. A few moments before the first of the pursuers appeared from the darkness, she grabbed his forearm and looked at him with desperate resolve. Don't let them take me alive, sir. Please." Sunny gritted his teeth, remained silent for a second, and then slowly nodded. His heart hurt. It hurt so much. The pain was almost blinding. A second later, a mighty black stallion appeared in front of them, bearing an armored rider on his back. The rider jumped down, moving with a speed that no mundane human could ever hope to match. He unsheathed his own sword and glanced at Sunny, his eyes hidden behind a visor of a menacing black helmet. His voice sounded like a voice of an ancient monster. "Step aside, warrior. We only need the maiden. You can still walk away alive." Sunny laughed. Ah, why did his heart hurt so much? Dying was already painful enough. He looked at the awakened hunter in front of him, then at the young girl he had sworn to protect. Why does this nightmare never stop? And then he lowered his sword and stepped aside. Both of them looked at him. The pursuer with dark amusement, his lady with shock and disbelief. Her voice trembled. "Sir, what are you doing?" Sunny remained silent for a few moments, then sighed. "Why is this world so insane? I am very sorry, my lady. Please don't hold a grudge against me. But you see, how do I say this?" He looked at her, then in the direction of the awakened hunter. Then he shook his head and said, "I am pretty sure that you are not real." Chapter 640, World That Has Gone Mad. Sunny looked at the terrified young girl, and then laughed. His laughter sounded more than a little bit unhinged. His lady shuddered. "Sir, you... Sunny waved a hand in the air. No need I understand. I sound crazy." The night sky above them was covered in an impregnable veil of clouds, and the one below them was empty and dark. The ancient stones they stood upon were slick with rainwater, and it was too dim to see anything except for vague silhouettes. The silhouette of the awakened hunter was towering, menacing, and embodied the very concept of terror. But Sunny didn't care that much. Massaging his chest, he smiled crookedly and said, his voice hoarse and raspy, "But then again, this whole world is insane. Someone told me once, I don't quite remember who, that we can only reflect what is in front of us. Is it my fault that there is nothing in front of me except for madness?" He looked down, his smile turning into a wicked grin. "And someone else once told me that they wanted to destroy the world. Back then I thought them insane. I think, but now, I wonder." The awakened hunter took a step forward, his monstrous voice permeating the darkness like an insidious murmur. "Weak, so weak his mind is broken." Sunny laughed again. "Ah, yes, I am very, very weak. But I am not weak enough, I guess. Somehow I have a feeling that I wasn't supposed to be able to last that long. Who would be able to endure that much pain, that much horror, and that much suffering without losing their mind completely?" He glanced at his sword, then at the approaching enemy. "And yet I did. Actually, while some of those nightmares, gods, how cruel they were, did hit a nerve, overall I am surprised to admit that. They really weren't that bad." Sunny stared at the awakened hunter with a concerned expression, then scratched the back of his head. It's crazy, huh? It is almost as if after you have already been gutted once, nothing else can impress you that much. Or if you have already watched your mother die once, the second time won't be as well, maybe it would. I don't know. I am a bit confused about what is real and what is not. Maybe I am myself not real. There's one thing I'm sure about, though. The young girl slowly backed away from him, her face painted with fear. The awakened killer tilted his head a little, then asked with curiosity, "What?" Sonny shrugged. "Well, it's that, real or not, I am really hard to break, as it turns out. At least not to the point where I'll be unable to think and notice things. Oh, and I did notice a few things." He slowly raised his sword and pointed it at the approaching hunter. "One thing I noticed is that my heart always seems to ache. Doesn't matter whether it's in a nightmare or in the real life. So, that demands a question. If the heartache is the same, then maybe the nature of both the dream and the reality is the same as well." He took a step forward, a confused expression on his face. "The second thing I noticed was that many of my thoughts, actions, and reactions don't really make sense. Sometimes my hands will try to do something on their own, and sometimes fragments of feelings, ideas, and judgments that I have no cause to possess will just appear on their own. Easy to explain in a dream, not so much in the waking world. And I am awake, am I? Or am I? Or am I not? Sometimes, it's hard to say." He laughed again and assumed a defensive position, waiting for the terrifying awakened hunter to attack. "Well, and the last thing I noticed were the radiant spheres of light I seem to be able to see inside the souls of living beings, or vile orbs of darkness in those of the corrupted. It took me a few nightmares to realize that those were soul cores. Strangely, once again, this ability pursued me from the nightmares into reality, making the two seem so much alike. So with all that said, I am really only curious about one thing." Sonny smiled, ready to meet his death once more. "You see, in my nightmares, I met all kinds of creatures. Awakened warriors, corrupted monsters, even transcendent immortals. Some of them had one soul core, some two or three." He lingered for a moment, and then looked past his enemy, at the mighty black steed standing motionless behind him, barely visible in the shadows. "So, my question is, why does this damned horse always have six?" With that, he dashed in the opposite direction from where the hunter's sword flashed, abandoning the young girl he was sworn to protect without a second thought. Sliding on the wet stones, Sonny dove under the flying blade and jumped to his feet, putting all of his weight into an attack of his own. However, his strike was not directed at the menacing killer. Instead, it was directed at the tenebrose steed. Unobstructed, the tip of the sword touched the mighty beast's onyx coat and shattered, as if striking adamantine stone instead of a living being. In the next moment, the awakened hunter's blade pierced him from behind, exiting out of Sonny's chest in a fountain of blood. Ignoring the terrible pain and the blood that was flowing from his mouth, Sonny grinned and looked at the motionless horse. The stallion looked at him back, his eyes dark and full of boundless, terrifying malevolence. A gargling laughter escaped from Sonny's lips. "Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Kill me again, bastard. Kill me as many times as you want. In this nightmare, I am just a mundane swordsman, but in the next one, or the one after that, or the one after that, I'll be someone powerful enough to rip you to shreds, and then I will kill you again and again and again. Let's see which one of us is going to break first, you wretched pony." The black steed looked down at Sonny, his eyes igniting with ghostly crimson flames. He snorted quietly, and then opened his mouth, full of sharp teeth that were more like those of a wolf than that of a horse. And then the nightmare bit down on the trembling human's head, easily crushing it between his mighty jaws. Sonny died, and woke up with a tortured scream. It was time to face a new day. He rolled out of the dingy tent he had been sleeping in and grinned, mad sparks igniting in his dark eyes. It was time to hunt an evil horse. Chapter 641, Dream Battle. Sonny and the diabolical steed of the fallen Shadow Lord battled across an endless tapestry of nightmares. Both were possessed by an insatiable desire to destroy the other, burning with bloodlust, fury, and relentless killing intent. Their blood flowed across 100 harrowing dreams, dissolving into the crimson rivers that had been spilled in the kingdom of hope across the centuries. As the weaker of the two, it was Sonny who bled most of the time, but every time he was torn apart and killed, he made sure to at least leave a mark on the stallion's tenebrous black body. No matter how many times the damned horse killed Sonny, he had to share in the pain. Sonny was not only being hunted. No, he was a hunter himself. What did it matter how many deaths he experienced? What ghastly torments the nightmares held in store for him? In this realm of terrors, he was as immortal as the Stygian steed. Every time he died, he was reborn anew. And every time he was reborn, there was a chance of becoming someone or something that the infernal stallion would not be able to defeat. When that happened, their roles reversed, and it was the black horse that had to suffer, be broken, and die by his hand. Every kill filled Sonny's soul with jubilant, dark glee. He didn't care about dying over and over again, about witnessing atrocious horrors and experiencing the worst cruelty a person could imagine. He wasn't even sure that he was a person, after all. But no matter who or what he was, Sonny was content to endure as much agony as there was, as long as he could make the dark courser feel it too. Neither of them could die in the dream. So this battle was going to be decided by the tenacity of their wills. They were going to see whose spirit would break first. Sadly, the opportunities to really hurt the Shadow Steed were few and far between. Across all of the history of the Kingdom of Hope, there were not that many creatures that could challenge his vicious strength, and even less that Sonny was fortunate enough to inhabit in their darkest moment of despair. That was not to say that his hunt was without success. After giving in to madness and abandoning faith in the reality of the nightmares and of his own memories, Sonny was left with a gaping emptiness in place of where his identity was supposed to be. He knew very few things about who he really was, and didn't really care to know more. It held no meaning for his goal of tormenting and killing the black horse, over and over again nevertheless. A few constant things soon revealed themselves. His aching heart, his gift of gazing into the very souls of living beings, and his name. That was the only thing he managed to remember. Lost from Light, that was his name, and that was who he was. After Lost from Light managed to remember his name, it acted as an irresistible anchor that slowly pulled other things from the darkness of oblivion that shrouded his true self. Not actual memories, but far more useful things, skills, fragments of knowledge, insights, patterns of thought. Just like a body had a memory of its own, a soul had one as well. Knowing one's name, the true name, was a key to unlocking it. So, he wasn't completely helpless against the infernal steed. What's more, Lost from Light discovered that he had a strange aptitude for this harrowing dream battle of theirs. Waking up in a new body after each death, be it a man or a woman, a child or an elder, a human or a beast, a mundane creature or an awakened one that possessed unique and unexplainable powers, would have been utterly confusing and debilitating for any warrior. How could one fight if they didn't know themselves? But his mind possessed a remarkable flexibility to it, an insidious ability to adapt to any circumstance almost in an instant, as though it was formless and shapeless by nature, and thus easily molded to fit any situation. Lost from Light found out that he could masterfully wield a large number of weapons regardless of whom he was reborn as though he had fought in countless battles before. He was able to learn to wield any other by simply observing his enemies for a few moments. He could easily peer through their technique and intentions, and use that knowledge to destroy them. When he was reborn as a fearsome creature, he could almost instantly understand how to use his bestial body to rip the enemies to shreds, as though he had lived countless lives as countless monsters. But, most importantly, he found out that fighting against those who were stronger than him was his second nature. Lost from Light's mind was full of treachery and cunning, which he could use to deliver terrible wounds to the fearsome stallion even when their might was vastly incomparable. And so, they hunted and killed each other through numerous nightmares, waiting to see which one would break first under the weight of hopelessness and never-ending suffering. Lost from Light wouldn't break, but the damned horse refused to break too. The black steed was as resilient as he was, as stubborn, as willful, and as ruthless. It endured the endless stream of wounds and deaths Lost from Light delivered upon him with the same unbreakable determination, his hatred and murderous fury only growing stronger. The courser possessed an evil will and a devious mind of his own. He was ready to suffer terrible torment for eternity, too, as long as it meant destroying his enemy over and over again. Not caring about the agony, the stallion seemed darkly content to share it with his feral prey as well. The black steed was as mad as Lost from Light was. Neither of them gave up, no matter how many times they were mangled, mutilated, ripped apart, and killed. Neither of them broke. So, in the end, it was the never-ending nightmare that had to fracture and fall apart instead. Chapter 642, Rude Awakening. Bloodied and crazed, Lost from Light dragged his body across a vast plain of weathered stone, his sword scraping on the black rocks. Behind him, the shattered remains of a warship were being consumed by fire, painting the darkness of the night with an angry orange glow. In front of him, some distance away, a beautiful black steed stood on shaky legs, red foam falling from his mouth. The eyes of the tenebrous beast shone with a dreadful crimson light, but behind the boundless fury and hate, a deep sense of exhaustion hid there, mixed with confusion, resentment, and pain. Lost from Light grinned. "What? What are you waiting for? Come here. Come and take me, wretch." The stallion breathed heavily, streams of searing steam escaping from his nostrils. He snorted with anger, then lunged forward, lowering his head to skewer the enemy with sharp horns. His steel hooves rang sonorously, causing swarms of red sparks to fly off the ancient stone, and his black mane waved in the wind like a stream of pure darkness. They clashed beneath the empty night sky, and then, Lost from Light died. Or so he thought. Instead of dissolving into darkness and being reborn into a new nightmare, he fell to the ground, causing the whole world to shudder. What is this? Am I finally done for? He thought that he saw strange tears appear in the very fabric of reality, and then reality crumbled like a vast black veil. Everything around him, the stone island, the burning debris of the broken ship, even the lightless black sky, rippled and swayed as a silk curtain that was being crumbled by an invisible giant hand. A moment later, torn and broken, that curtain fell apart. It was a magnificent sight, to see a whole world disintegrating right before your eyes. Sometime later, Lost from Light found himself in a boundless darkness, surrounded by pure nothingness. His pain was no more, in fact, he didn't even seem to possess a body. Instead, he had turned into a formless shadow, with 3 orbs of black fire burning furiously in its depths. Lost from Light laughed. "What happened? Don't tell me. Don't tell me that you ran out of nightmares, beast. Oh, what will you do now?" Instead of a response, something moved in front of him, behind him, all around him. Out there in the darkness, there was another shadow. But this one was deeper, vaster, and much more ancient. It was full of malevolence and hatred. As his voice echoed in the nothingness, the vast shadow suddenly surged forward, enveloping him. And then, Lost from Light, Sonny woke up. Sonny rolled out of the bed, clutching at his chest. His gauntlet scraped against the onyx metal of the mantle of the underworld, and in the next second, he fell onto the cold stone floor, looking around wildly, his eyes full of confusion and fear. Where am I? Another nightmare. He saw a terrifying snake coiled in a corner, pale moonlight glistening on its Stygian scales, and a graceful knight in black armor standing guard at the door. For a moment, Sonny panicked, but then remembered who they were. Saint, Soul Serpent? And then, he remembered who he was. His pupils widened. "I'm awake." The fragmented memories of the countless nightmares drowned his mind, each one more harrowing than the other. Some of them were already fading away, like dreams usually did, but some remained almost as vivid and vibrant and terrible as when he had lived them. Sonny shuddered and let out a stifled shriek. For a few moments, his sense of self grew fragile, the madness of his nightmare self clashing against his actual being. But then, the real him, the one that was an awakened fighter, instead of a nameless being locked inside a never-ending wheel of torturous nightmares, won over and absorbed the other somehow. It was a proper mess. But Sonny had no time to pay a lot of attention to the chaotic, and without a doubt, dire process of his different divergent selves melding together. Because, as soon as he fell to the floor, he heard the painfully familiar sound, loud, threatening, drawing closer and closer. The ringing of steel hooves on cold stone. How, what? He was too disoriented and shell-shocked to gather his thoughts and understand what was happening. He knew only one thing for sure. The damned horse was coming. Saint suddenly raised her shield and stared at the door, while the soul serpent silently blended with the shadows. Sonny was already trying to stand up, a desperate thought trying to form in his mind. Memory, I need to summon a memory. I need a weapon. But he didn't get a chance to. Just a moment later, the wall of the chamber suddenly exploded into a flood of stone shrapnel, and two furious crimson eyes appeared in the darkness behind it. The black stallion, the awakened terror that had once been Shadow Lord's steed and companion, galloped into the chamber right through the stone wall and rammed into Sonny without slowing down one bit. In the short moment before that happened, Sonny got a chance to get a good look at him. The creature appeared exactly as it had in the nightmares. The stallion was tall and graceful, his coat as black as night, and his eyes burning with menacing crimson light. Lean muscles rolled under his skin with each movement, making it glisten with dark luster. His hooves seemed to be forged out of somber adamantine metal, as were his curved horns and sharp, terrifying fangs. The tenebrous steed seemed to be surrounded by shadows, his silhouette cloaked in their dark mantle. He was as beautiful as he was terrifying. More importantly, the terror was heading right for Sonny, with cold hatred burning in his dreadful eyes. A split second later, the stallion rammed him at full speed. Arg! The black horns failed to pierce the stone-like metal of the mantle of the underworld, but Sonny felt as though he was hit by a speeding train. His armored body was raised into the air and flung backward. The courser carried him forward on the sharp horns, and a moment later rammed into the other wall of the room, shattering it with Sonny's back. Sonny felt another terrifying impact, and his vision momentarily went black. Surrounded by a cloud of stone debris, the two of them, the demon and the terror, fell out of the jagged breach in the keep's outer wall and into the cool night air, plummeting down from the height of the abandoned castle's main tower. Damned horse, why can't you just die? Chapter 643, Clash of Shadows. Sonny and the black steed plummeted down in a cloud of shattered stone. Far below them, the courtyard of the Boundary Fortress lay, shrouded in darkness. It was growing closer and closer, approaching with terrifying speed. Neither paid it any attention, however. The stallion bit down on Sonny's shoulder with all his might, his sharp fangs scraping against the stone-like metal of the mantle of the underworld. The fearsome onyx armor was an ascended memory of the 6th tier, a whole rank above the diabolical shadow, so the courser was not supposed to be able to damage it. However, to Sonny's shock and dismay, the metal plates actually groaned and bent, crushing his flesh. He roared with pain and anger, then thrust his forehands forward, ripping the terror's chest with his claws. Dacked drops of blood fell down like rain. Intertwined, the two of them hit the cobblestones of the desolate courtyard. However, instead of being broken by the fall, both simply submerged into the veil of shadows, drowning it, as if the ancient stones had turned into a lake of liquid darkness. For a moment, Sonny found himself floating in the tenebrous embrace of deep, unfathomable shadows. Usually, turning into a ghostly shade would have meant escaping to safety. But today, his enemy was a similar creature himself. A vast and terrifying presence lunged at him from the darkness, full of fury and boundless, chilling, killing intent. The black steed had pursued him even into the shadows. However, this time, Sonny was ready. He had never fought anyone or anything as a shadow, but he had been attacked in this form twice, first by the Mirror Beast, and then by its insidious creator Mordred of Valor, the Prince of Nothing. Both were able to steal his own ability and use it against him. What did it mean? It meant that while Sonny could not damage mundane shadows, as Shadowblade Kurt had been able to, he was capable of destroying other shadow creatures, just like they were capable of destroying him. In his shadow state, Sonny was shapeless and formless, but that also meant that he could assume any shape and any form. It was just a matter of his will, mind, and imagination. As the vast presence that was the nightmare steed lunged at him, he moved to meet it, turning into a long, narrow blade made of darkness. They clashed, tearing each other's souls apart. Sonny's whole being was instantly drowned by terrible suffering, but he also felt a silent scream of agony escaping from the rippling shadow that was trying to enshroud him. Both the demon and the terror were thrown back into the corporeal world, Sonny rolling away on the cold stones, the tenebrous steed sliding on them as his hooves struck sparks into the air. Kill. I'm gonna kill you, bastard. Just you wait. Sonny roared and rose to his feet, outstretching one hand to summon the cruel sight and another to summon the moonlight shard. Two burning crimson eyes streaked through the darkness, and he was hit in the chest again. His lower hands grabbed the horns of the infernal stallion, and the mantle of the underworld suddenly grew as heavy as a mountain. That didn't slow down the courser one bit, however. Together they struck the wall of the dilapidated fortress. Sonny shrieked, feeling his spine come very close to snapping. If not for bone weave, he would have undoubtedly been shattered into pieces. The wall of the fortress was shattered instead. A whole section of it cracked and then crumbled, making the ground tremble as a vast cloud of dust rose into the air and blotted out the stars. The damned terror carried him through the cloud, emerging from the other side of it a split second later, and then threw Sonny to the ground, trying to impale him with the horns. But his enemy never let go of them. So instead, the four-armed demon was dragged across the emerald grass, tearing the soil apart. One of his hands flashed forward, piercing one of the stallion's eyes with a ghostly stiletto. Or at least, trying to. At the last moment, the black horse snapped its head sideways and bit down on the blade of the moonlight shard with his fangs, then jerked his neck and sent Sonny flying through the air. Damnation! Sonny spun in the air and landed on his feet, sliding back a dozen meters as the soles of his armored boots tore the ground. A moment later, he grasped the shaft of the cruel sight from the air and raised the somber spear, ready to strike the enemy. But the black steed had somehow disappeared and was nowhere in sight. His vertical pupils narrowed, and then Sonny spun, sensing a swift and vast shadow circling him from behind. The blade of the cruel sight suddenly shone with pure light, tearing the darkness apart. The nightmarish courser was forced back into the corporeal form and instantly came under attack. The tip of the spear bit deep into his shoulder, causing more blood to fall on the grass. Uncaring, the terror twisted and shifted his weight, standing on his front legs as both hind ones were thrown into the air, drawn like powerful springs. Sonny shivered. Krah! In the next moment, the black horse struck backward with both legs, catching him square in the chest. The breastplate of the mantle of the underworld rang mournfully as a thin net of cracks appeared on it. Stunned and blinded, Sonny was sent backward, flying above the ground with terrible speed. He collided against an ancient tree and went right through it, the thick trunk exploding into a cloud of splinters. Then he hit the ground and bounced from it, flew some more, then crashed down again and rolled for dozens of meters, blood shooting out of his mouth. Hurt arg, that hurt. His heart hurt too. It hurt way, way too much. Gulping for air and unable to force it into his four lungs, Sonny shakily rose to his feet and stubbornly raised the cruel sight. And then the black steed shot from the darkness and rammed into him again. This time, both of them slid off the edge of the island. Chapter 644. My Enemy. Sonny and the Stygian courser continued their battle in the darkness of the sky below, then fell on the swaying surface of a heavenly chain. Turning into swift shadows, they clashed again and again as they glided across its length with terrible speed, ripping each other's souls to shreds. Traversing many kilometers in a matter of a dozen heartbeats, they emerged from the shadows and shot upward, then crashed on the surface of the next island, wrecking and destroying anything that appeared in their way. The courser rammed Sonny again and again, carrying him further and further away through the night, not giving Saint and the Soul Serpent any chance to catch up. The stallion used his devastating hooves, his adamantine horns, and his sharp fangs, anything he had to deliver as much pain and damage to the wicked, tenacious, hateful enemy of his. But Sonny was consumed with the same murderous fury. He returned the favor with his weapons, his claws, and his own fangs and horns as well, forgetting everything except for the crazed desire to obliterate his foe. They rolled across the unfamiliar island like a wave of destruction and flew high into the sky. Sunny with the help of the dark wing and the heavenly burden. The terror with the help of nothing but the force of his hind legs and the terrifying range of his dashing jump. His fangs caught the fragile fabric of the transparent cloak, tearing it apart, and then both of them plummeted down once more, landing on another chain and instantly submerging into shadows. Just like that, they fought without stop, overwhelmed by the maddening desire to destroy the enemy. When they clashed in their corporeal forms, Sunny was always on the losing side, receiving more wounds and being thrown around like a tattered rag doll. However, when they became shadows, he held the advantage. Despite the fact that the Black Steed was 3 whole classes ahead of him, they were of the same rank, and while the Courser was a more ancient and powerful shadow, Sunny was a divine one. Suffused with the flame of divinity, each of his attacks dealt more damage, and that damage was far more terrible as well. His shadow form, while much smaller, was far more fathomless and resilient, held together by the bond of a true name. His soul was much harder to destroy. They fought and fought and fought, flying through the night as their bodies became broken and bloodied, and their souls became tattered and torn. And yet neither was willing to give up, neither was willing to let the enemy live. Sunny had never experienced a battle that was so ferocious, swift, and devastating. Everything happened too fast and hurt too much for him to properly perceive and comprehend. At some point, he stopped trying to, giving in entirely to his intuition and battle instinct. There was only one truth and one unbreakable law after all. He had to kill the enemy and prevent the enemy from killing him. Everything else was just noise. Finally, exhausted and covered in wounds, they reached a deserted island where nothing living dwelled or grew. Rolling on the ground, Sunny used 2 shadows to augment his mangled body, and the third one to serve as his second pair of eyes. Deep in the battle trance of clarity, he was able to perceive the whole world as one interconnected picture, with each part of it existing within the same complicated pattern as all the rest. His mind was forged into a single sharp edge, all of his thought dedicated to the battle, clear, purposeful, and swift. He saw the silhouette of the infernal black horse approach him from the darkness, bloody foam streaming from the stallion's mouth, unshaken will burning in the dreadful crimson eyes. By now, the two of them knew each other better than they knew themselves. After all, they had spent countless nightmares hunting and killing each other, only to continue the battle in reality after the nightmares could not keep up anymore. They were evenly matched. The Black Steed was far more powerful and had experienced centuries of bloody battles. But Sunny was devious, cunning, and full of insidious treachery that made up for his lack of strength. Neither could overwhelm the other, and at this point, both were probably going to die trying. The steed seemed to be at peace with such an outcome. And Sunny was too. He would have preferred to stay alive, though. Curse you. A low growl escaped from his lips, and then Sunny suddenly dismissed his weapons and even his armor, standing motionlessly under the starlit sky, his nakedness covered only by a crude loincloth. Raising one hand, he massaged his aching chest, then bared his fangs in a dark grin and growled, "Let us end this, then." The Black Steed stared at the hateful enemy for a few moments, and then lowered his head, starlight shining on the sharp tips of his horns. And then, the courser charged forward, breaking the ground with the push of his adamantine hooves. Sunny lunged forward as well. He had only one gamble left, one desperate, devious trick. Since he and the tenebrous stallion knew each other so well, he was going to try and turn into the terror's shadow. Using shadow dance against another shadow was a strange concept, since shadows were formless and shapeless by nature. How was he supposed to peer into the very essence of something that was shifting and ever-changing? Well, he was either going to do it, somehow, or die. That was why Sunny had dismissed his armor and his weapons. The Black Stallion did not use any weapons or armor. After all, only his hooves, his fangs, his horns, his unbreakable will, and his furious desire to kill. That was what Sunny had to use, too. He recalled everything he could about the endless stream of nightmares, every torturous death, Every indescribable torment, every excruciating loss he still remembered, and how his enemy had been in those vile dreams. He remembered a similar deserted island, centuries ago, where the Shadow Lord said his last goodbye to his faithful steed, and their exhilarating ride across the night skies just before that. He remembered every wound that the stallion had dealt him, and every wound that he had dealt in return. And then, he tried to use shadow dance like he had used it on countless humans and creatures before, only this time peering even deeper, wishing to understand even more. For a moment, it was as though Sonny himself became the Stygian steed. He felt it, the rage, the hatred, the dark resolve, but also deep underneath it, boundless loneliness, sorrow, and longing. Ah, what a terrible fate it was, for a shadow to walk the world without its master. He saw himself wandering across the ruins of the Kingdom of Hope, mournful and lost, and then returning to the now empty fortress that had once been his master's home, only to see it be overtaken and desecrated by marauding strangers. He felt a deep, maddening rage, and gave in to this madness, letting it consume him. And then, Sonny saw himself charging at a bloodied form of a four-armed demon. He saw clearly what the black steed was going to do to kill him, a split second before it happened. And so he sidestepped the attack before it even came, raised his upper arms, locked his fists together, and brought them down with all the devastating, inhuman power he had. The charge of the stallion missed, and instead, a terrible blow descended from above, landing on his spine and shattering it. The black steed tumbled to the ground, suddenly paralyzed, and remained laying there, his side rising and falling shakily, his hoarse breathing slowing down and down. Sonny fell too. Ah, hell! It felt like he was dying too. The pain in his chest had finally grown intolerable, as if his heart finally reached its limit. Turning his head, he stared at the dying horse, whose dreadful crimson eyes were slowly growing dim and cold. After a while, the madness burning in them was extinguished, and a shadow of a new emotion appeared in them. Confusion, pain, and sudden recognition. The black steed breathed in one last time, then let out of quiet whine, and died. Sonny closed his eyes. He was so tired. I won. Well then, maybe it was time for him to die too. In the darkness, the voice of the spell whispered into his ear, its voice soft and solemn. You have slain an awakened shadow, Nightmare. Your shadow grows stronger. He felt a vast amount of shadow fragments flow into his cores, reinforcing them, and thought tiredly, strange that doesn't feel like just 6 of them. But the spell was not done speaking. It remained silent for a moment, and then said, You have received a shadow. Your aspect legacy mastery level has increased. You have received the right to claim a legacy relic. Sonny weakly tried to smile. Such great news. This would have been great if I was not dying. And then a strange sound invaded his ears. It sounded like the rustle of sails. Chapter 645, Facing a New Day. There was warmth, sunlight, and the smell of fresh sheets, wood, and green leaves. Sonny slowly opened his eyes and felt the bed beneath him sway gently. No, the world itself had swayed. It was time to face a new day. Suddenly overwhelmed by terror, he sat up with a growl, his eyes wildly searching for the signs of danger, disaster, and death. His 4 hands rose, sharp claws ready to tear flesh apart. No, it was all a dream. I'm in the nightmare again. I never escaped. Panic washed over his mind, but then slowly receded. Sonny remained motionless for a few moments, then lowered his gaze and stared at his 4 hands. This was the shadow demon's body. He was awake. He was himself the nightmare version of himself. Ah, it was all so convoluted. He remembered the desolate fortress, the endless torments he had dreamt of, the fearsome battle with the black steed and his eventual victory, the terrible pain of his last heart giving out. Tutum-tu-tump, tutum-tu-tump, tutum-tu-tump. Hearing the strange sound, Sonny looked at his chest. His 3 shadows were sprawled on the ground, So the rough skin of the shadow demon had lost its obsidian color and was back to its original complexion, as pale and gray as it had been back when he first entered the nightmare. There was a thin, barely noticeable scar running vertically from his collarbone to his abdomen. And beneath it, tum-tump, two mighty hearts were beating steadily, circulating rivers of blood through the gaunt, towering body of the four-armed demon. He blinked a couple of times. I am alive? Not only was he alive, but he also seemed to possess two perfectly healthy hearts. Remembering something, Sonny shifted his gaze back to his hands and noticed that his two missing fingers were now back, be it of a slightly different color and seemingly carved out of ashen, polished wood. He tentatively made his hands into fists and saw the wooden fingers bend, as if they were no different from the other 18. He could even feel the texture of the skin on his palms pressing against their tips. His two new claws were forged out of lusterless steel. Finally, Sonny raised his eyes and looked around, trying to understand where he was. The room he saw was not very spacious, but also not small. Its walls and ceiling were made out of wood, and so was the floor, hidden under an opulent plush rug. The bed he lay upon was sturdy and large, with a mattress so soft that it seemed like a cloud, and pristine white sheets covering it. There were several pieces of luxurious furniture in the room, a pile of bright-sitting pillows on the floor, a tray with succulent fruit on an intricate wooden table, and a large window on one of the walls, opening onto a breathtaking view of the boundless blue sky. Despite the lavish decor, the room felt familiar somehow. Sonny frowned. Wait a minute. Wasn't there a room just like this, but far more dilapidated and empty, on the ancient flying ship the firekeepers had repaired? Suddenly, something clicked in his mind, and his vertical pupils narrowed. Noctis, that lying crook. Sonny was back on board the magnificent sky vessel that had a beautiful tree growing around its mast, only that vessel had not been shattered and wrecked, then recovered and restored by Cassie's cohort yet. It was still owned by its original captain, the great and powerful sorcerer of the East, Noctis. He must have picked Sonny up after the battle with the black steed and kept his promise, fashioning a new heart for the shadow demon's body, and even replacing the fingers Sonny had lost while trying to learn how to weave. Which was very nice of him, but didn't mean that Sonny would not still enjoy ripping the bastard limb from limb. That lying sack of monster crap, spend the night in the fortress, sunless. What's the worst that could happen, sunless? I'm going to strangle him. Sonny growled hatefully and clenched his fists, almost slicing his own skin apart with the claws. He was full of resentment, fury, and vengeful wrath. However, after thinking about it for a few moments, he had to hide his fangs and make a sour face. Yes, the thought of making the deceitful sorcerer squirm felt very nice, but no matter how weak and affable Noctis seemed, he was an immortal transcended, a chain lord of the Kingdom of Hope. Someone whose mere presence was enough to scare a terrifying corrupted monster away. There were far more productive things in life than harboring thoughts of revenge against someone like that. Besides, there was so much Sonny had to think about instead. The nightmares, the battle with the Shadow Stallion, the rewards he had received after emerging victorious from it, his future plans and actions. Sadly, he did not receive an opportunity to consider all these important and vital things. As if summoned by Sonny thinking of his name, the damned sorcerer suddenly opened the door and entered the room, whistling a jolly tune under his nose. Noctis was just as Sonny remembered him, carefree, pleasantly likable, and dressed in extravagantly colorful silk garments. His raven-black hair was immaculate and lustrous, and his beautiful gray eyes sparkled with jovial light. Noctis saw the four-armed demon and smiled brightly. Ah, Sunless, you're finally awake. Sonny stared at him, the corner of his eyes twitching. Bastard, you have the audacity to smile at me after sending me to that hell. He hesitated, then let out a low growl as a greeting. Come to think of it, what exactly was the sorcerer planning to do with him now? A vague memory of one of the nightmares suddenly entered his mind, one where he had been turned into an obedient wooden doll by a who had it been? Sonny suddenly shivered. Noctis continued to smile, and then said in a strange voice, Well then, since you're up, why don't you come with me, huh, Sunless? Sonny gulped. Somehow, he felt that this invitation was not really something he could refuse. Chapter 646, Familiar Sights. Thinking that it was unwise to refuse the immortal sorcerer, Sonny rose from the bed and hesitated for a moment, noticing that he was completely naked. Numerous wounds that he had received in the Red Colosseum and later, in the battle with the Black Steed, had turned his gray skin into a map of scars, with lean muscles rolling under it like mountain chains. Noctis gave him a funny look, then cleared his throat and pointed to a chair that had a black kimono hanging on its backrest. The garment was made out of silk, intricately stitched, and fit his towering figure perfectly. It even had 4 sleeves instead of 2, revealing that someone must have sewn the thing specifically for him. Feeling the cool caress of the soft fabric on his rough skin, Sonny covered his nakedness, fastened the belt around his waist, and then put on a pair of leather sandals. Feeling somewhat like a proper human again, or rather, a proper demon, he then tied his wild black hair with a black ribbon and followed Noctis out of the room. As they walked to the upper deck, the sorcerer couldn't help but throw glances at him, mumbling some nonsense in a barely audible voice. Wonderful, marvelous. My complexion is without a doubt the fairest there is in the kingdom of hope, but alas, black doesn't suit me at all. I won't be caught dead wearing black, or alive really, but this is just perfect. Finally someone to do justice to this night silk I bought. It must be fate, indeed. No doubt about it. Sonny stared at the immortal transcendent with a concerned scowl on his face. The man was clearly a raving lunatic. Another one. Why the hell is everyone in this damned nightmare insane? They walked onto the upper deck of the flying ship, where Sonny saw a somewhat familiar picture. There was a beautiful tree growing around the main mast, with the middle of the vessel drowning in the cool shade of its wide branches. The bark of the tree was ivory white, and its leaves were vibrant emerald in color. The difference with how the flying ship had been in the future was that the original tree he was staring at right now was much taller, stronger, more robust, ancient. Now that he had witnessed the consecrated grove of Heart God, Sonny easily recognized its origin. He also shuddered, remembering the nightmare in which he was reborn as an old man. That one was perhaps the most terrible of them all, mostly because it reminded him of his own past, his own mother, his own loss. Noticing a subtle shift in the expression of the sullen demon and misunderstanding it, Noctis smiled proudly. Ah yes, she's a real beauty. This noble ship is the last of her kind, an original. All those flying buckets the rest of them use are just crude imitations. He patted the bark of the sacred tree in passing and continued forward, heading for the bow of the ship. You are probably too young to remember, Sunless, but a long time ago, the sky below was full of divine flame. Back then, there were fearless daredevils who dove down into the ocean of immolating fire to harvest some of it. This is the last remaining vessel of their fleet. The sorcerer smiled. All the rest were turned to ash, along with their crews. Even the memory of them is long gone. Shame those guys were really something, the fire hunters, a fun crowd. Not very bright, though, which was how I got my hands on this beauty. Won her in a game of cards and made some improvements. He laughed. I am the best player in all of the Kingdom of Hope, you know. I even won that obsidian knife you carry once, from the one in the north. Oh, you should have seen her face when she had to give me the prize. That was back when she cared about such stuff, of course. Sonny blinked and stared at the sorcerer, dumbfounded. No, no way. He won one of the 7 knives by playing cards? The 7 knives created by Sun God? Noctis glanced at him and winked. Ah, yes. The rest of the lords had the exact same expression you do right now. They were very angry with us too. It was a giant mess. I sort of lost that knife later on though, so they mellowed out. He grew silent for a bit, and then added, his voice a little darker. But these knives, they never really stay lost for long, you know. It's really, really hard to get rid of one. Impossible, in fact. They continued forward in silence. Disturbed, Sonny turned away and looked over the railing of the flying ship. It seemed that Noctis had not moved the vessel away from the deserted island where the battle between Sonny and the Black Stallion had ended. It was still below, empty except for a few jagged rocks laying here and there. The only difference was that, now, There were beautiful white flowers growing from the soil where the drops of the lonesome steed's blood had fallen on it. A giant mess. Sunny knew that there were 7 immortals created by the Lord of Light to guard, or rather contain hope. Their strings were torn out of the tapestry of fate, made to loop endlessly onto themselves, and placed into 7 strange knives, and so the knives were both what made the Chain Lords eternal and the only thing that could kill them. Each of Hope's wardens was entrusted with the key to another's death. This was what kept the balance between them, so, of course, Noctis had made a huge mess by managing to get his hands on a second one. No wonder the other lords were angry. Even though losing one of the knives was something only a complete idiot would do, in this instance the sorcerer had been lucky enough to somehow manage such a feat. Otherwise, he might have found himself in hot water or molten steel. Sunny shuddered and closed his eyes for a moment. Finally, they reached the bow of the ship and descended a set of stairs, eventually stopping in front of a heavily reinforced door that looked faintly familiar. Noctis unlocked the door and invited Sunny inside. There, Sunny saw armored walls, a high ceiling, and 3 chests standing in the center of the room. Staring at one of them in particular, he suddenly paled terribly and took an involuntary step back. Noctis glanced at him with confusion, then shook his head. "You are very strange. Don't be afraid, these are just my treasure chests. They won't bite." He thought for a second, and then gave one of the chests a playful kick. "Well, except for this one. This one will eat you alive." Chapter 647, 2 Answers. Sunny stared at the painfully familiar chest, his black eyes full of fright and venomous resentment. Of course, he had recognized it instantly. It was his old nemesis, the mordant mimic, the vile creature that had almost eaten him alive once, in the distant future. Granted, he had ended up being the one to feast on the flesh of the abomination instead, which had been a traumatic experience in and of itself. But who was to say that he would be able to kill the fallen devil again? Sure, Sunny was much stronger and more experienced now. He had more cores, thousands more shadow fragments reinforcing them, much better equipment, and inhabited the body of an actual demon. But there was also no crushing in this era to help him hold the creature down while the broken oath did its job. Thankfully, the bastard seemed to be behaving itself, maybe out of fear of its master. Actually, Sunny looked closer and frowned, noticing that the chest had only 3 soul cores, none showing any sign of corruption. They were bright and pristine, just like that of any other creature following the path of ascension. However, they were also too dim to be of the ascended rank. The mimic was neither fallen nor a devil yet. It was simply an awakened demon masquerading as a treasure chest, which was a bit of an improvement, but still didn't really explain why Noctis was using a powerful demon as a piece of furniture. I guess the mimic grew stronger sometime in the future, and was also corrupted somehow. Sunny relaxed a little, but then his scowl deepened. While Noctis opened one of the other 2 chests and started enthusiastically rummaging through it, 2 thoughts entered Sunny's mind. One was very simple: coins. However, no matter how alluring the image of the miraculous coins was, the second thought took precedence. What the hell? Those words Noctis had just said, weren't they mentioned in the description of the covetous coffer? Yes, they were. So Sunny was, and had always been the pale friend mentioned in it. Huh? How could the spell have known that this exact scene would play out all that time ago? Back then, Sunny had not even known about the existence of the nightmare seat in the ivory tower, let alone harbored any thoughts of entering it. There were 2 possible answers, both of them equally unnerving. One was that the nightmare was not, in fact, a recreation of the past. Instead, it was just the past. The spell knew what Noctis was going to say because this conversation had already happened thousands of years ago and possessed the power to send people back through time. Sunny wasn't quite ready to believe that, though. Things didn't really add up. If each nightmare allowed Awakened to travel through time and return to the past, they would have been able to cause changes in the present through their actions. There had not been too many nightmares conquered since the spell had appeared, but also not that few hundreds at least, and maybe even thousands. So, he was more inclined to consider the other answer. The second answer had to do with the nature of the spell and the domain of its alleged creator. Weaver was called the Demon of Fate for a reason, after all. Their mask allowed Sunny to steal a glance at the tapestry of fate and see the past, the present, and the future of everything, all at the same time. Just one split second of this terrible knowledge had almost driven him insane. Perhaps the spell which was woven out of those very strings of fate was able to perceive the depths of the tapestry as well, and hence knew that it was Sunny's fate to enter the nightmare, meet Noctis, and have this conversation in the treasury of the flying ship. That possibility was, perhaps, even more frightening. Damnation, my head hurts. The mystery of the seemingly innocuous description of the covetous coffer had turned out to hold a key to a very important piece of the grand puzzle, one that was too important to be considered hastily. The whole nature of the world as Sunny knew it could be changed entirely, depending on which answer was true. He was going to have to think about it more, and later, in excruciating detail. And speaking of excruciating, Sunny lingered, then glanced at Noctis. Suddenly remembering all the torment he had gone through because of that shameless crook, he gritted his teeth, thinking of all the ways he would have made the bastard pay, if he could. The crook in question, meanwhile, smiled widely as he pulled a sparkling emerald medallion out of the chest and threw it to Sunny. "Aha, there you are. Here, catch." Sunny caught the medallion and studied it with a dubious expression. There seemed to be an almost invisible, intricate string of runes carved into the precious stone. What is this crook planning now, I wonder? Ah, I wish I could rip his flimsy body into tiny pieces and listen to him scream. I would have started with the fingers, I think, and worked my way up, one little piece at a time. Noctis stared at him with a strange expression, his face frozen. Sunny frowned. Why is that idiot staring at me? Gods, what a lunatic, huh? Wait a moment. He blinked. Why does it sound as if I'm speaking aloud? Damn, am I going crazy as well? Crazier, I mean. The sorcerer cleared his throat, then cautiously hid his hands behind his back. Yeah. That emerald trinket you're holding is a very rare and precious magical amulet. It can project someone's thoughts outward and vocalize them, turning thought into sound. So, do stay away from my fingers, please. I am quite attached to them, unlike some people. Sunny paled. What? No. He heard all that. Wait, crap, he heard that too. He shuddered and hurriedly dropped the emerald amulet to the floor, then stared at it in abject horror. Noctis smiled. Oh, Sunless, don't fret, my friend. I know it was just a bit of friendly teasing. I've heard way worse anyway. You are actually a very restrained individual, as far as demons go. He bent down, picked up the amulet, and offered it to Sunny with an innocent grin. So how about we have a hearty meal and talk? There's so much we must speak about. Chapter 648, With Good Intentions. A few minutes later, Sunny was staring at a table full of all kinds of delicious food. The table was situated on the upper deck of the flying ship, allowing for a breathtaking view of the shattered kingdom of hope below. Being that high up in the sky, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of discomfort. The fear of the crushing was already deeply ingrained into his bones, however. The terrible curse that dictated the lives of everyone on the chained isles did not exist yet. He had nothing to worry about. Or rather, he did not have to worry about that particular danger. There were plenty of other existential threats surrounding him, however. The food had been served by obedient wooden dolls wearing tasteful silk liveries. Sunny was pretty sure that each of the animated mannequins had been a living creature once, their souls torn from their bodies and placed into the dolls by the person sitting across from him. Taking a sip of a cooled wine, the person in question smiled brilliantly and gestured at the food. Come, Sunless, enjoy. Sunny hesitated for a bit, then reached out to put a few portions of several mouth-watering dishes onto his plate. He was careful not to touch the emerald amulet that lay in front of him, knowing that doing so would reveal all his thoughts to the damned sorcerer. That thing was maybe the greatest danger he faced, while the ability to communicate with people was something he had been thinking about from the first day of entering the nightmare. Sharing his every thought was not something Sunny was ready to deal with yet. His flaw had been constraining what he was able to say for a long time now, so his mind was a kind of safe haven for Sunny. For that reason, he had developed a tendency to run wild with his thoughts. Revealing them all to a mad sorcerer was not a very great idea. Noctis watched him eat with a carefree smile, then said in a friendly tone, "By the way, Great job killing that nasty horse. What a feat. What a gallant deed. Truly vanquishing it was an exploit worthy of being sung about, but sunless. The sorcerer hesitated for a moment, then leaned forward and asked with a bit of exasperated desperation in his voice, "Please tell me why. Why, for the love of the gods, did you kill the horse?" Sonny, who was taking a sip of cold water, spat it all out. Coughing, he stared at Noctis with murderous fury burning in his bestial black eyes, then ground his fangs and put his palm on the emerald amulet. "What the hell do you mean? Why did I kill the horse? You were the one who sent me into his damned lair. The horse was this close to becoming the end of me. What else was I supposed to do?" Then he clenched his 4 fists and growled. The nerve of this bastard. Sonny, of course, meant for that last thought to remain unsaid, but sadly one of his fists was still touching the enchanted amulet. Noctis looked at him, blinked a few times, and then flung his hands into the air. "I never meant for you to fight it. Do I look like an idiot? That horse destroyed hundreds of creatures much scarier than you. Why would I send a mere demon to battle it?" Sonny opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. Finally, he hissed, "Yes, I don't know. Why did you send me into the fortress?" The sorcerer gulped down his wine, remained silent for a bit, then let out a bitter sigh. "Oh, well, I just thought that since you are both shadow creatures, it might have liked you. Didn't you know each other back when your master was still around?" Sonny looked at the beautiful immortal for a few moments, then trembled slightly and covered his face with 2 hands. That damn fool. This time, he was careful to not touch the amulet while thinking that. The worst part of all of it was that Noctis was not entirely unfounded in thinking that the black steed would not attack Sonny. The body he was currently inhabiting had, indeed, been acquainted with the stallion centuries ago, back when their lord had been alive. The problem was that Sonny had replaced the 4-armed demon, and thus had no memory of knowing the black courser, while the courser himself had gone mad during the hundreds of years of solitude and only recognized his old companion seconds before death, when his madness receded for a few short moments. So, all that horror, all the pain and torment he had gone through in the nightmares was the result of a tragic and cruel twist of fate. It was just a series of wicked and disastrous coincidences, nothing more and nothing less. Sonny let out a low growl. "Forget it. It doesn't matter anyway. Not now, and not anymore. The important part is, Noctis might look like an eccentric idiot, but he is anything but. If he wanted me to reunite with Shadow Lord Steed, there was a reason for that. What does he really want?" He hesitated, then placed his hand back onto the amulet. "Why did you want me to meet that thing?" The sorcerer remained silent for a bit, then smiled charmingly. "Oh, right. By any chance before you killed it, has Nightmare shared anything with you? The location of a certain glass knife, for example?" Sonny snorted. "Ah, so that's what all of this is about." He took a bite out of a loaf of delicious freshly baked bread, chewed it unhurriedly, thinking about nothing at all, and then responded in a calm tone, "Sure, there is something that I learned. Why?" Noctis cleared his throat, glanced at the scenery, then back at Sonny. Finally, he said with a bit of visibly forced indifference, "Oh, well, would you mind sharing?" Sonny stared at him for a bit, then grinned. With his bestial face and 2 rows of sharp fangs, that grin looked truly frightening. "Would I mind, huh? That depends. Why do you want that knife?" Noctis smiled with his usual carefree attitude, then waved his hand dismissively. "Ah, it's nothing much. A small thing, really, you see. I just want to gather the knives, start a war against both the Ivory City and the Red Colosseum, kill all of the Chain Lords, defy the Lord of Light, break the will of gods, and release the demon of desire out of her prison, and then maybe have a cup of tea." The sorcerer grew silent for a moment, and then added thoughtfully, "Actually, on second thought, maybe I'll have the tea first." Chapter 649, Kingdom of Madness. Sonny stared at the immortal sorcerer, stunned by those words. The scale and scope of the bloodshed and adversity Noctis was striving for were simply beyond comprehension, And yet he had confessed this terrible desire with the same carefree, nonchalant, jovial attitude as though he was indeed talking about brewing tea instead of waging war on 4 deathless saints and their armies. Sonny remembered the first time he saw Noctis, bloodied, crestfallen, sitting motionlessly in front of the fire, with a diamond sickle laying at his feet, its blade marred with crimson. A grim and somber thought formed in his mind all by itself. Insane. You are insane. All of you are. He flinched, then removed his trembling hand from the emerald amulet. Noctis threw his head back and laughed, as if he heard the funniest joke in the world. The silent sailor dolls stood around him, motionless, staring into emptiness with their crudely carved eyes. The scene that was strange and fantastical a few moments ago suddenly seemed threatening and eerie. After a while, the sorcerer grew quiet, then glanced at Sonny with a mischievous smile and asked, "Yes, indeed. I could not have said it better myself. All of us are insane. But don't you get it yet, Sunless? Don't you understand why?" Sonny frowned, then shook his head. What the hell is he trying to say? How was he supposed to know why everyone in this damned nightmare seemed completely mad? And then, something moved in his mind. A seed of a thought, a nascent hint of understanding. His pupils narrowed slightly. There was something strange about the Kingdom of Hope. He had first sensed it after escaping the Red Colosseum and facing Solvane, that beautiful and utterly demented fiend. Her actions made a perverse, and yet perfect sense, but there was still something wrong about her. Back then he had felt a vague suspicion. Something seemed out of place. Something didn't make sense. And after, when he had been thrust into the never-ending nightmares, this feeling only grew stronger. He just had no time to think about it. Everyone here seemed slightly or greatly off. Every emotion was sharper and cut deeper. Every vice or virtue grew out of control until it turned into a destructive obsession. He had experienced it all, lived through all of it in the nightmares over and over again. Pain, sorrow, tragedy, madness. Even Sonny himself was affected by this insidious strangeness. His single-minded obsession with learning how to weave, the sudden intensity of his affection toward Elias, the subsequent crushing heartbreak over the young man's death, the unquenching hatred he had felt for the black steed, all of those things were not exactly out of his character, but slightly more consuming than they should have been. Remembering the past few months, Sonny shivered. Wait. Feverishly, he tried to recall all he knew about this nightmare. The 7 knives, the 7 immortals, 1,000 years of solemn duty, the terrible torture one of the rulers of the Ivory City had been subjected to by his own brother, the destruction of the sacred grove, the Shadow Lord making a choice to take a coward's way out before what? Suddenly, an expression of shocked understanding appeared on Sonny's face. He looked at Noctis for a while, and then cautiously picked up the emerald amulet. A single word formed in his mind. Hope? The sorcerer smiled, then nodded and looked at the vast expanse of the shattered kingdom below them. Indeed, hope. Noctis took a sip of wine, the smile disappearing from his face. A few moments later, he said indifferently, "The Lord of Light bound hope with 7 brilliant shackles and made those shackles eternal. That was us, me, and the rest of the Chain Lords. He entrusted each of us with the fate of another, and a solemn duty to never let the demon escape, and for a few centuries everything was fine." His face grew dark and cold. The sorcerer remained silent for a while, and then continued. But slowly we grew tired. Doubt found its way into our hearts. Eternity is a heavy burden, Sunless, and under its weight, unnoticed, one of us grew twisted. So another one made a choice to uproot the corruption. That was how the first of the Chain Lords died. Adre, my dear friend, murdered by that wicked slayer, Solvane, her beautiful grove burned to the ground. Noctis remained motionless, but the wooden mannequins surrounding them suddenly clenched their fists, their fingers splintering from the immense pressure. Their crude faces did not move, but Sonny could feel an almost palpable feeling of fury radiating from their figures. The sorcerer sighed. And so all of our fates were sealed. Yes, 6 shackles still remained, but Hope's prison wasn't perfect anymore. Her will, her insidious influence seeped out, little by little, infecting us all, slowly devouring the whole kingdom, every living being in it, from the smallest insect to the mightiest immortal, igniting our desires, twisting them, changing us into something different, something terrible, rampant and vile. He laughed. Oh, of course, none of us noticed it for a long, long time, hundreds of years even. Maybe only Shadow, and by the time the rest of us understood, at least those who were still sane enough, it was already too late. The whole of the Kingdom of Hope had been driven mad by its former ruler, had been turned into a vicious hell. We were all taken by hope. Noctis smiled and sipped his wine, then chuckled. So, yeah, Sunless. All of us here are insane. I thought you would have known already, judging by the scars covering your body. The warmongers are all insane, and so is their leader, Solvane. The citizens of the Ivory City are also mad, just as their two rulers are. The one in the north is perhaps the craziest of us all. Well, except for me, of course. I am the maddest person in all of the Kingdom of Hope, I would have you know. Sunny stared at the gleefully smiling sorcerer, suddenly overwhelmed by terror. That damned seed, that damned Mordred. Curse the day he told me about how rare and precious it is. The sorcerer chuckled. Well, I don't know who Mordred is and what seed you are talking about. However, there is one thing I do know. Actually, it's a question. That question, it has been tormenting me for centuries, Sunless. Do you know what that question is? What was the seed of my personal madness? Sunny frowned, then slowly shook his head. Noctis lingered for a few moments, then looked away and said with a wistful smile, "That is a question Aedra asked me a long time ago. You see, if the Lord of Light wanted the seven of us to keep Hope imprisoned, forever." His smile widened slightly, then suddenly dimmed. Then why did he give each of us a key to her freedom? Chapter 6-5 Drast, Measures. Sunny remained silent for as long as he could, until finally the flaw forced him to give an answer. He looked grimly at Noctis and then said, or rather thought hoarsely, "Maybe he just wanted to see you suffer." Noctis laughed brightly, then nodded. "Oh, indeed. Maybe you are right. Gods can be very cruel sometimes. After all, they are much more ancient and vast than kindness and compassion. Or maybe it is not really our lives that keep the demon bound, but instead our will and desire to keep her imprisoned. Or maybe it is a test of our conviction, that is what the Sun Lord believes, at least. Or maybe he actually hoped that we would free her. Who knows?" He smiled, then sighed, and finally added, "If mortals like us could know the will of gods, then we'd be gods instead." After that, a somber silence settled over the deck of the flying ship. Sunny stared at the delicious food in front of him, realizing that he had lost all his appetite. Hope, the demon of desire, how terrifying she was. Slowly, several things that had seemed random and meaningless fell into place. The jubilant crowd in the blood-soaked red Colosseum, the perverse conviction of beautiful Solvane, the harrowing torture of the Sun Prince, the madness that burned in the eyes of the Black Steed, all of it was the result of her harrowing power. Hope held domain over desire after all. And with that power she had reached through the tiny cracks in her prison and drove a whole realm utterly insane, turning it into a ghastly, hideous, demented hell. Every aspiration, every desire, every dream, every hope were twisted, set aflame, and turned into a weapon. An insidious, invisible weapon that struck at human hearts and minds from within. No one was immune to her power. Neither mundane humans nor awakened, not even saints. Those who were close and those who were far, all fell victim to the daemon's curse. And what was her own hope? What was the demon of desire yearning for? Well, that was easy. Hope wanted to be free, just like Sunny wanted to be free, really. She was driving her jailers mad so that they would destroy each other, and from the looks of it, her curse was working all too well. Solvane was seeking out death. The two transcendents of the Ivory City seemed to be on the verge of fratricide, and Noctis was planning to kill them all. The one in the north, Sunny, didn't know about the last Chain Lord, but from the little bits of what the sorcerer had said, she was not in her right mind either. Suddenly he remembered the sight of the time running in reverse that he had witnessed at the very start of the nightmare. The ivory tower had descended from the sky, and the burned wasteland around it had turned into a beautiful white city. Which meant that one day, perhaps soon, The Ivory City would be burned to the ground, and Hope's prison would then break off its 7 chains and rise above the chained isles. And then, the crushing would be created somehow. A cold, dire feeling grasped his 2 hearts. Oh no! Suddenly, Sonny came to a harrowing realization. His eyes widened, and he glanced at Noctis with fear. This was the conflict he, Cassie, Effie, Kai, and Mordred had to resolve to conquer the nightmare. They had to either help this mad sorcerer free the terrifying demon, or make sure that she would never escape. The 5 of them were pitted against the 5 immortal saints. A barely audible groan escaped from his lips. How is this possible? What happened to the spell always being fair? How the hell can this be fair? Another revelation suddenly appeared in his mind. Those words Aedra had said before accepting Solvain's challenge, the gratitude she expressed had Solvain really eradicated the Blessed of Heart God to punish Aedra for her heresy. Or had the beautiful warrior known all along what would happen if one of the Chain Lords was killed, and doomed all of the remaining immortals, including herself, to a fate worse than death, to a slow and inevitable descent into madness, followed by eventual destruction, all in order to free Hope from her prison and herself from eternal life? If so, she had indeed been the bravest of them all, and also the most hateful, or admirable, depending on how one looked at it. But that didn't really matter. Sonny grasped the emerald amulet and channeled a somber thought, which came out in a hoarse voice. There was one thing that he still couldn't understand. The obsidian knife that I carry, the one that you lost. How are you going to kill the other Chain Lords without it, and without the knowledge about the glass knife that I received from the Black Steed? Noctis looked at him for a bit, then smiled darkly. Ah, that the drastic thing I was about to do? Well, it was a really terrible choice. I am very glad that fate sent you to me when it did, Sunless. He chuckled. You see, Sunless Desire is a very powerful thing. In fact, it is perhaps the most powerful thing in the world. It is what the gods were born from, after all, in the endless, ever-changing void of chaos. But there is one force more terrifying than desire, and that force is fate. The sorcerer looked away with a distant expression. Even gods are afraid of fate, Sunless. So I was going to make a deal with a certain creature. A harrowing, evil, and insidious monster. The vile demon known as Weaver, who holds domain over fate. These knives can kill us because they hold the strings of our fates, so if anyone can find a way to end our lives without the knives, it would be Weaver. As Noctis mentioned Weaver's name, he shuddered, then forced out a pale smile. But the demon of fate would have asked a terrible price of me, I'm sure. So it is very fortunate that you came along. Just imagine that fiend would have made me into something ugly, or even worse, poorly dressed. The horror. Noctis laughed and gave one of the sailor dolls a command to bring another amphora of wine. He either didn't notice or pretended to overlook the sudden tension that appeared in Sonny's eyes. So Noctis wanted to make a deal with Weaver to free Hope, and then I suddenly appeared? A cold shiver suddenly ran down his spine. What exactly does that mean?